Welcome to Season 7 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those who pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice and determination. Let's get on with the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations is proudly brought to you by Loudon Private Wealth, the team trusted by professionals, veterans and families across Australia to build real long-term financial security. If you want to take control of your finances, protect your future and build real generational wealth, Loudon Private Wealth are the people you want in your corner. They don't do gimmicks, they don't do hype, just smart strategy and honest advice coupled with real-world experience. Check out the links in the description to contact Warren and the team via loudonpw.com.au or 02 8313 0418. Now let's get back to the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations was brought to you by Dead Reckoning Rum, creating individual rum releases commemorating the diggers lost in Afghanistan, proudly supporting veterans, donating 50% of all their profits to veterans organisations around Australia. Look up Dead Reckoning Rum, buy some bottles, connect via Instagram and Facebook and give them your support. Now, let's get back to the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue. Today I have a guest on who had a very distinguished career and he served around the world on multiple deployments around the world, and he's joined us today to talk about his career in the Australian Army and also his life after service. And when you hear his story, you'll understand why I wanted to get him on the podcast, and it's an absolute honour and a privilege to have him on. His name is Damien Silva, and he was a combat medic. And, mate, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Mate, it's an absolute honour to have you on, mate. And before we get into your career, mate, let's go back to a young Damo. Talk me through life growing up as a young whippersnapper back in the day. What were you like at school? Do you have, brothers and sisters? And did you ever see that you would join the military?
Yeah, so me back in school is a very different version of me now. I'm the oldest of 6 from parents divorced, remarried, had multiple different kids, different partners. So I got family in Victoria and Adelaide now. I moved around a lot through school because we'll talk about it a bit later, but like I'm an army brat. So then when my parents left the military, they moved around a bit more. So I lived in Victoria. I think I went to, it was 4 primary schools and 4 high schools.
Yeah, right.
So I moved around a lot. I was also the fat kid at school, so I got picked on a lot at school.
I'll join you there. I was the fat kid and got picked on, yep.
Yeah, so, but look, I was happy, like hard-working parents. Once I left the military, my father drove trucks, became a mechanic, or vice versa. Sorry, he was a mechanic, then started driving trucks after an injury. My mum was a factory worker, but hard worker. They did the best they could for us, so I'll never look back on that. Like, we didn't have tons of money, but they always put us first and we're happy. So, and unlike these days of social media, when left school, left the bullying, I was able to just be my own little happy place at home, so it was good. Hobbies-wise, I did a lot of martial arts growing up, so I knew how to fight, but that was the only sport I did. Which, looking back on now, I wish I'd done a bit of team sports. The military really helped me with that when I joined. That's why I'm pretty pro sports now for my kids, so they get that social stuff. But yeah, so it was just a bit of moving around early on, lots of different houses and stuff, but I think that made me more adaptable for the military, so moving around a lot helps.
Well, I was going to say that with changing schools so often, like, that's very hard to make friends and like lifelong friends, because you don't know how long you're going to be there, and then you move on to the next school and the next school. And like, would you say you were a scholar at school or no?
No. So I was smart enough to get good grades, but I was too lazy to get good grades.
Yeah,
which
right. I think that's most military and first responders, mate.
Yeah.
Way after.
Ironically, joined the military and then decided to get some degrees and stuff like that. But that's okay. I think it was just at the time I was just doing my own thing. it did help me moving around, and it actually gave me a chance to reinvent myself a couple of times. So a good example, when I left big Victorian school I was in Berwick at the time, very like bullied a lot, all this sort of stuff. But that's when I started to do a lot more martial arts and my own training, and I actually, in between school holidays, got really fit, and then went into my new school, the fit new guy, into year 11, and so I actually had a really great year 11 and 12 in my new school, because all they knew me as the new fit guy versus my previous school where I was the fat kid who was bullied for multiple years. So, look, it worked out.
And you mentioned that your mum and dad had served in the military.
Yes.
Did you have any other family members that had served before your parents?
Yeah, so my parents, so my mum did 10 years as a truckie. My dad did 12 years. First he was 6 RAR, then decided he wanted to trade, so actually went and became Ramey. Before them, my mother's father, so my grandfather, he did 26 years.
Wow.
Yeah, they were called transport mechanic back then, before they separated, and he'd actually done 3 tours of Vietnam, which I didn't know before his passing, because he never spoke about his military career until I'd actually joined, and he passed in my first year of joining. So I unfortunately didn't get to know him like that. But he also was a part of post the bombing in Japan as well. He was actually part of the cleanup crew there too. So, and prior to him, I had multiple uncles in World War I and II, and great-grandfathers. One of my great uncles, I think he survived, I think it was 3 days. He off the boat and got killed. So
right.
I've got actually pretty long, and I've got a couple of other uncles on other sides of the family who'd served. So I've actually got a pretty long military history.
Yeah, so, and for you, mate, everyone remembers September 11. So you've gone through, like I did, 80s, 90s, into the 2000s, military through your own, like your parents. It's peacetime. September 11 happens, mate. What do you remember of that day? And did you foresee that many years down the track you would be in Afghanistan fighting the war on terror?
Yeah, so I actually do remember that really well. I was in year 12, and I just got to a friend's house because we were going to hang out at his place afterwards, and it was all over the news. I'd long before then planned to join the military, but to be honest, I didn't really think about how it would impact me a lot, because I was planning to join the army. I had planned to go infantry at the time, and I just thought of it as like, I'll join, and if I'm a part of this, because obviously prior to that, America wrapped up a lot of their conflicts fairly quickly, so I didn't really think about it a huge deal, to be honest, and definitely didn't think I'd be a part of it. What would that would have been 8 years later.
Yeah.
So when I actually got to Afghan, it was about 8 years later.
And you, as you mentioned, mate, America wrapped up their wars, like Gulf War One was over very quick.
Yeah.
So you're thinking, oh yeah, it's just this is going to happen. America will go in, have a little show, and then who would have foreseen that the war would have lasted 20 years?
Yeah, exactly.
The longest war. Like Vietnam was a long time. It was 10 years. And then this war was even longer. And then through the facets of Iraq, Afghanistan, and all the rest of where the war on terror was deployments, you're just a young fella that didn't, looks at it very different now to what you did back then, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, I definitely remember it, though, because it was a bit surreal.
Oh.
So, I think it was for a lot of people, I remember someone once saying they thought it was a movie playing on TV. So
I did, yeah. I was a kid. I honestly thought, geez, this is great special effects. And then it was on every single channel. I was like, ooh, and... yeah, it changed the world, mate. That day changed the world, and we've never been the same since that day. Everyone who was born in that time, and it's funny when you speak to kids that are born after, they go, "What? What was that? What?" And you're like, "Yeah, it's just time in history, mate. That we all were there to witness."
Well, first time a first world country was struck so hard, and left a big imprint.
Absolutely, and so you mentioned, mate, that you were looking at going down the infantry path, but as I said at the start, you became a medic and you joined the army in 2002. What made you go down that medical path? Where did this come from?
So it's funny, if you actually polled half of all the males in Med Corps, I reckon at least half of them would be colourblind, and it's the same for me. So I knew I was colourblind going into recruiting, didn't know it impacted me. So I did all the testing, passed everything, good to go, and then obviously through the medical testing found out I was colour perception borderline 2, 3. If you're 2 these days, you can get an infantry. At the time, though, it was a no-go for me, so I was obviously devastated. But then they gave me my options, and I saw medic was one of the options, and I said, oh, okay. Like, as a medic, will I still get to work with infantry, go where they go? And he goes, yeah. Obviously, typical recruiter was like, yeah, man, yeah, go where they go, do what they do, you do all the same stuff. It's just you'll just be the guy that, like, medically treats them and stuff. I think I half sold it to myself as well. But, look, honestly, best thing that ever happened to me. Like, looking back on it now is one of those someone must be looking out for me kind of things, because it's, honestly, I love medical. Once I obviously got in, best thing that ever happened. And look back on it now and look back at mates who were in infantry and stuff like that, I'm like really glad. And a lot of infantry guys will come over to MedCorps, so I was just glad it kind of worked out the way it did.
So talk me through the process back in 2002, because the internet is early existence. It doesn't. So do you ring up 131901? Like, what's happening there? And like, talk me through that joining up back then.
Yeah, so like I said, I'd always planned to join like since I was knee high, not because of my family force or anything like that. It was that never even forced at all. But I used to remember my dad talking about his time as a grunt. He was in 6 RAR, and it just appealed to me. And I even spoke to my mum recently when I mentioned I was coming on this, and she said it's just always what you wanted. So I knew what I wanted going through school, but I wanted to make sure I got my year 12, because nothing's certain in life. So my dad had actually said, if you're going to go, just go when you turn 17, mate, when I was in year 11. And I said, no, I want my year 12 because I want to have a backup plan.
Smart decision, mate.
Because I could, who knows, I could have got to recruit and they could turn me down for whatever reason. They were a lot more stringent then. So I finished year 12, called the recruiting number. I was living at the time living with my dad in Broadford, so I had to go back to Melbourne where my mother lived at the time to do all the process. Went through the bouncing balls, got the ticks in the box. Then I had to, once I picked medic, they're like, oh, it's a 6-month wait. Look, if you come in as a QE, you could just do QE, you trade and then jump across. Said, nah, want to be a medic? Thank fuck. I did that. Like, honestly, did not fall for that ruse. Said, no, I'll wait. It's only 4 to 6 months, no big deal. So I got a job working at a tyre place.
God, they work hard.
Yeah. It was hard work, but it was good. And I think it was 3 months later, I got the call up saying, yep, we have a position in Kapooka for you. Are you ready to go? I said, yep, I'm ready to go. So hadn't told my boss when I got the job. I'm like, hey, by the way, I'm out, mate. And then just off to Kapooka.
So, mate, everyone talks to me about Kapooka. What was it like when you got there in 2002? It's very different to what it is now. What was it like when you got there in 2002?
Oh, look, I was actually pretty lucky because before I joined, I was working 2 jobs. I was working at a tyre factory and I was working at a go-kart track. And one of the guys at the go-kart track I had talked about joining to for ages because I worked there part-time for a while. So he decided to go do reserves. So he'd gone to Kapooka and come back before I'd even left.
Yeah, okay.
So he gave me the complete download. So I knew what was happening week 1 through to week 6 because I just did the 6-weeker. So when I got there, it wasn't easy, but I knew what was coming. And it's like the old adage, knowledge is power. So I just knew what was coming. As for going through, there was no bullying when I was there. It wasn't... That stuff was gone by 2002, so it's just people yelling at you. It's just all got to be good with your time. Look, I didn't. That's a lie. I did not enjoy Kapooka, but I just pushed through, and I reminded myself, which I've done a few times in my career, when I'm dealing with something difficult. I just go, there's been many people who've done this before me, and there'll be many people do it after me. So if they can do it, I can do it. And I did injure myself at one point. Luckily, didn't get back squatted. I just had to work through that. Hurt my back, but it was no biggie. I just pushed through and got through to the end, and that was it.
Did you get the family down to see you march out?
Yeah, I had too many. I invited way too many people. I invited because at that point, obviously, my parents had divorced, new partners, so both sets of new parents came, siblings came, the girl I was dating at the time came. when you had to pay for your people to come, when I had to like tell my instructor how many I wanted to come, he's like, "Fuck, mate, what are you doing?" Well, these are all my family.
Yeah, that's right.
So no, I got everyone down. And it was good. It was good.
So, because you have gone down the medical path, and for the civilian listeners, infantry go to Singleton and go and do their IET, so initial employment training to the civilian listener. Mate, where do medics go for your initial employment training?
So at the time, you could go 2 places. So you could go to Albury or you could go down to Cerberus. Did not get to go to Cerberus. Whoever went there says the best time ever because you're obviously down in Melbourne in the heart of it. I went to Albury. It was fine. So I can't remember what it was called back then. It's called the Army School of Health now. I think it was, I can't remember. I think it was ALTC back then. But so the model's completely changed now.
Do you think for the better? Or
yes. Is my answer. So the model I went through was you would go down, you do something called your basic medic course, which was a 9-month course. Then you go post to a unit. It had to be to a unit where you were supervised, so it was into normally a CISB or something like that, a combat services battalion. Then you do minimum a year and a half, and then you come back to the school and do another 5 months and do your advanced medics course. And then, only after then, you could work unsupervised, solo, medic, out with the battalions or whatever. The current Army decided that SIS pipeline was too slow because there was certain locations there was a backlog. So, for example, I went to Townsville, wasn't a backlog. So people getting on between a year and a half and 2 years. There was people in Darwin who waited up to nearly 3.
Yeah, right.
So they were technically non-employable fully until they've done this advanced medic course. So Army went not feasible. So they went to a pipeline system where you come in and you would do, I'm just trying to think of what the new length is. I think the new length is 18 months and it was, but it's continuous. And it became tri-service at the same time. So all 3 services were getting the same quality of training. With that came its own issues because they were popping out fully qualified medics who are now ticked off solo operators, but they've got no in-unit experience. So it's like anything, you can argue it both ways. I think having that year and a half in a unit to solidify my basic skills before I did advanced set me up for really good success. Some would argue you can get that at the end of your pipeline if they support that, which the units try to, but not always happens. So
anyway. you mentioned, so you finish your training, and then you get posted into the 3rd Combat Services Support Battalion.
Yes.
What are you doing in this role? When you get there, how are you received by the battalion, and what are you got? Are you going field with the guys? What's happening? So
it was actually a pretty good place. So when we were picking postings, I was at the time 19, and there was a retraining course. Said, mate, where's it good to go? So I don't care where I go. I'm 20, like I'm a young male. Don't care where I go. And he's like, look, man, Townsville's a good choice. He goes, it's a really good place to go, good opportunities up there. So he recommended it, and when I was happy with going to. When I got there, I enjoyed it. 3 CISB itself, so it was back then, because the CISB still exists, but the health element doesn't exist. So CISB is broken up into its support functionality. So you'd have transport, you'd have RAMI, you had Q, you had Med, and I'm sure there's some others I'm missing in there who'll get grumpy, but they're the ones I remember. So for the med guys, we were broken up into a couple of areas. So you either worked in the regimental aid post, the RAP, you would be put in or a treatment team or into evac. Evac was the senior guys who were qualified to work solo. So you new guy, you're either RAP or treatment team. Most are a treatment team. I was lucky enough to get the RAP, which is our GP medical centres. So I spent my first year there, which is great. Solidified all my training. So saw sick people every single day. Cough, cold, sore holds. You learn to pick out the people who are legitimately sick and those who are faking it to get out of some sort of work. But it really solidified my ability to diagnose a sick person, which then played hand in hand when I actually started going field. You would go field as an RAP as well, because same thing, people get sick out field, so someone's got to do that. So I did that for my first year. Second year, I rotated into the treatment teams. That's our role ones. So think of in hospital, someone gets sick, you go see into resus bays. That's what a role one is. It's led by a doctor, nurse, and then you got medics. So seeing a sergeant or a senior medic and a couple of medics working it.
So it's like a triage sort of...
That's exactly their job. They are attached to a combat unit. Combat unit goes forward with their integrated health medical, and then you'd have a treatment team following along somewhere on a battle space there to receive serious casualties. So I did that for my second year. In that second year is when I went and did my advanced medics. Loved it, had a great time. So in my second year, obviously, I went to treatment teams. In that is where you can be loaned out to other units who need med support too, for whatever reason. You can't technically work independent, but you can work in what would be assessed as a safe area to potentially sort of work in. It was a bit of a grey space. So in that time, it was when I actually saw my very first casualty. So I was attached to Assault Pioneer course, so it was deemed not high danger, just they needed med support there. They're doing a boating course at the time. So no DEMS or anything, because you had to be advanced medic for that stuff. I got attached to these guys, and that's actually where I met Tim Applin for the first time. He was the Assault Pioneer Sergeant. Awesome dude, met the corporals, really good bunch of 2RER guys. I was then sitting in a shack, just watching movies, chilling out, because what you do as a medic, you sit around reading books or watching movies, waiting for someone to hurt themselves at the time. And I remember hearing this, medic. I was like, what the fuck is that? Medic. I was like, pop my head outside the shack door, listening, can't hear anything, can't see anyone. Close the door slowly, and then medic, and I'm like, I definitely heard it. Open the door again, and some guys running down the beach and calling out they needed assist. So I grab my gear, leg it down the beach, get to this boat, and there's a guy inside missing half his foot. What had happened is he'd fallen overboard during the training, and his foot had got stuck in the prop guard and just got mashed up by the propeller, amputated his big toe, wrecked his foot. Anyway, so treated him on the scene. Got the Queensland Ambo in, like obviously did my part, handed it off to them. They took him off for surgery. Unfortunately, a lot of damage to the guy's foot, so he ended up being discharged down the track for that. Tim was there for me, like get me what I needed, got me the Ambos, like supported me post-event. I had to obviously document it all. He was like helping me through all that. It was just really good, like solid person to have there. Is like, obviously I'm a junior medic on my first mission by myself, and someone gets messed up by a propeller. So it was a really good experience, like in the sense of having that support from him, and then obviously being back briefed. Obviously that actually went through some inquiries because the guy got pretty messed up. Like I got cleared of any wrongdoing. Like essentially got said, short of like unless I was going to like be a surgeon and retouch it on the scene, it just was never going to be recoverable, unfortunately. So that happened and came back, and then actually not very long after that is when I went on my advanced medics course, and then come back, and then I came back and we got word about East Timor potentially kicking off.
Well, and I'm going to bring that in a minute, but you mentioned Tim. Who would have thought, mate, that years down the track you would see him at 4RR and then renamed 2 Commando for the civilian listeners in 2009, and then we're going to get to an incident where you were involved with Tim.
Yeah.
Who would have thought, mate, that all those years earlier he was with you on that exercise, and then going forward, what had happened? Like, if you had a crystal ball that day, and we'll talk about that later on. But you mentioned 2006, mate. This is where you deploy to East Timor as part of the treatment team. Talk me through this deployment. What were you doing over there, and how long were you deployed for?
So it was a bit of a random deployment. So because of the time, no one knew if East Timor was going to happen. So it was word it was going to maybe kick off or not. At the time, I also had braces on. So when my first year I got to Townsville, I, lucky enough, scored defence to pay for some braces for me just because my teeth were having an impact on my jaw. So I ripped out some teeth, gave me a set of braces. I was still allowed to do field exercises, but couldn't deploy with them. I was due to have them off the week after we were maybe leaving for Timor. So I was on the Orbat, and then they're like, we've got to pull you because try and get in, get your braces out. Couldn't get in. Anyway, luckily they bumped the Orbat by a week and a half. So I got my braces off, got my plate, and then literally back on the Orbat to go over there. Because we were very thin on the ground for medics. Because medics were, and they still are, a rare commodity in a lot of ways. When we were going to Timor, obviously units had advanced medics. The CISBs, I was one of 3 advanced medics.
Yeah, okay.
The rest were all basic medics who could not operate independently. So they needed me to go so I could be farmed out to units. So anyway, so I got myself back on the Orbat, but we still didn't know where we were going. We got on the Tobruk, or the Tobroken, sailed up to Darwin, still not knowing we're deploying. We're either going on exercise that year or deploying. Don't know which. It got to Darwin, got the, yep, you're deploying, comms black. So no, everyone, like, they said, yep, we're deploying to East Timor. Everyone's grabbing for their phones to go call their family, say, well, I'm deploying. And they're like, comms black, no phones. So I deployed. My family had no idea. And I couldn't even tell them before I left that it might happen. So anyway, just went to East Timor on the Tobruk. Then we did a beach landing, very fucking D-Day sort of landing. I was like, oh, I hope this is not going to end like that. We obviously did a beach landing at the airfields at the time. Airfields had already been taken by their 3RA, I think it was. It was either, I think it may have been 4 Commando took the airfields. I think it was them. Set up treatment team. They're ready to receive casualties. Then we moved from that location into the major bus terminal in the city as well after that, and established the CISB itself. I was there kicking around, being loaned out to units, a few different units for about a month or 2, and then I got given an opportunity to go out with 3 CSR, and they had to do a road recon of the entirety of East Timor because we hadn't been back there since the Ineffet days. Yep. So they wanted to do a full road recon and needed an advanced medic. So I was like, sounds like a pretty good gig to me. So I sat in the back of a MOG for 2 months.
Yeah, right.
Literally 2 months. But at the 1 month mark, we came back to the airfields and 3 CSU was gone. They'd been gone home. I was like, my whole unit was gone. And I was like, where's my unit and where's my shit? I had to ask around, found my OC at the A-pod, and she's like, oh, you're back? I'm like, yeah, I'm back. Where's the unit? And she's like, oh, everyone's going home. We're cycling out and we're cycling in. She goes, look, you got a choice. You can cycle back with me in 2 days, or you can stay, finish your gig with 3 CSR, and then we'll attach you to 3 RAR. I'm like, so my choices are to go back to Australia, work in the we call them the sheds where we just had our equipment counting gear, doing field X's, or stay on deployment. I'll stay on deployment. Yeah. So I stayed on deployment. And then went back out, did another month. It was awesome doing that gig with the CSR boys. Really great bunch of guys to work with. But also got to see all of East Timor, like parts people like never get to see at the time. And like it was really good. We engaged with the locals. I wasn't allowed to treat them. Just was a very solid, like I could not treat locals. It was just part of my medical ROE at the time. But we engaged with them, really lovely people. It was just great, brilliant. So I came back and then I got attached to 3 RAR. First time working in I'd worked with infantry prior to them, but obviously on a deployment. Did some jobs with them. It was really good. First time in their RAP, working with their guys. Also, really good experience. It's actually where I started doing my own personal training too. So to up that point, I just relied on Army, like keeping me fit. But then you're on deployment, there's no regular PT, so it was up to kind of yourself. Like the old adage in deployments, you either get fat or you get fit on deployment. And I chose not to get fat. So I started training, and a bunch of the 3 RA guys were really good dudes, kind of taught me how to train more effectively and really set me up for actually my fitness going forward through my career. So came back, and when I got back, I was fit, and I was keen to go to an infantry unit because I was due for a posting. When I came back, I'd actually asked to go to 4 RAR at the time because one of my mates at the time, Jody, he was going to 4 RAR, and I said, I really want to go there too, and there's just no spots. So they got me 1 armoured and said, look, do your 2 years at 1 armoured on your posting and we'll get you to 4 RAR after that. And so that's what I did.
And you mentioned through when you deployed to Timor in 2006, Afghanistan, this is where Afghanistan is kicking back off again, going like hectic, and you would end up in Afghanistan in a couple of years' time after this. But it's a key point you touch on, that medics were few and far between, and this is the busy time of the Australian Army, where you've got East Timor going on, the Solomons, Iraq, Afghanistan. Mate, busy times ahead for medics as well.
Yeah, well, that's why there was like stuff all medics for East Timor, was because all our advanced medics were either we weren't doing much Afghan then for 3 CISB, but it was a lot of guys were going to Iraq. I didn't get an Iraq spot because I was qualified as a corporal, but not a corporal yet. And they sent a corporal instead of me, which let's say I was not pleased about, because my unit recommended me, but the unit wanted a full track, so I just didn't get the gig. But yeah, so there wasn't many of us at all. So yeah, I went. But the irony is, I went to Darwin, and we'll probably talk about that next, actually. So I'll wait for the question.
Yeah. So you go to one armoured regiment, and are you basically, you're attached to them, you're going out field with them, and is there talk of them deploying, or what was happening there?
So yeah, that's a real good question. So I went on promotion as a full track to 1 armoured, got allocated A squadron, and that same time that's when their M1 Abrams were coming in. So they phased out the Leopard. So sitting behind you in my little office here is the Leopard shell
yes,
I-5.
I can see it,
yeah. So they let everyone in the unit, all the support stuff, we all got to jump in Leopard, fire, and get to keep the shell. So it's all signed off on that. So Leopards are out, Abrams are in. There was a lot of talk about deploying in Abrams at the time. Never happened. A lot of it was posturing. But when the Abrams came in, at the time, everyone in the unit was all about dedicated the Abrams. Post me leaving 2 years later is actually when 1 Armoured got the gig driving the Bushmasters for the SF guys.
Oh, okay.
And it's funny because when I deployed overseas, and we'll talk about it later, but I knew all the drivers of the vehicles because most of them were 1 Armoured guys who I just worked with. But yeah, so when I got to the unit, it was all about the Abrams. So we got the Abram in, we had to familiarise ourselves with the vehicle. Obviously, medical procedures had to change in support of them. They're a fuel pig, so all the unit procedures changed. So it was a very busy time for that. I used the time to once again solidify so this is my first posting into a unit in the RAP as a direct support member. So fully integrated. Wasn't infantry like I'd wanted, but I was still arms corps and I was still in with the guys. So I used that time to just really get my fitness up to scratch for my hopeful posting of 4 hour at a time, and also learn what it is to be an integral medic out on your own without the support, and you're in charge of your guys, you're managing your guys. So I was pretty lucky though. I had a great WOMED at the time. Her name's Jo Cook. She was awesome WOMED. Really gave me some really good direction, how you could be a good WOMED. Worked with a bunch of good corporals as well. I was lucky enough because we got the Abrams in my second year there. My squadron went over and worked in the US for a couple of months to learn how to integrate Abrams between the two countries in the event that potentially we ever had to drive their vehicles or so it was called Exercise Eagle, I think it was, off the top of my head. So I went over there for a couple of months. It was brilliant. I got to work with the US medics. I worked with someone there, SEAL medics, who a guy done his SEAL selection. I learned about how they do their medic pathway. So it was a really good time. I mean, we went to Las Vegas. It was a good time. So while I didn't get to deploy while I was with 1 Armoured, I at least got that opportunity. The irony was I was actually recommended for 3 deployments by my WOMED, but the CO at the time did not want to give up any of his medics to deployments because they were his medics and compromise his capability. When he left same time as I did, and when the new CO came in, different mindset, was happy to let medics deploy, which was great for them. So just meant my 2 years there was no chance of a deployment, which I used the time most effectively as I could.
Oh, of course. And as we mentioned, so Jody, who is literally, when this podcast comes out, Jody's episode will have gone out. So Jody Ticey's episode will come out, and it actually what he's in very well here, that Damien's podcast will follow from Jody's, and Jody gets the posting to 4RR first, the posting that you wanted, but went armoured. And then in 2009, mate, you actually got that posting to 4RR Commando. What did you... had you heard much about Commando? Because 98 was the first selection of the wider army of 4RR. Had you heard much about what the Commandos were doing, or when you got there, or before you got there in 2009?
Yeah, I knew a little bit because I wanted to prep for when I arrived. So I'd learn a bit. When I originally asked to be posted there, I didn't know a lot about it. But then in those 2 years at One Armoured, I actually educated myself. So I learned a lot about the unit, the history, and just understanding what I would be doing there. Once I got the posting order, I'd spoken to their WOMED. He actually had wanted to get me on some para courses and just to try and get some courses before I got there to take the load off me once I arrived. But once again, my unit wouldn't release me, so it just wasn't going to happen. So when I did arrive, I was actually pretty lucky. So the sergeant coming in at the time, and I can't mention his name because he's still in the units, but he had been my very short-lived corporal when I was at 3 CSB, because he'd done time in 1 RAR, came back for a corporal for a while in 3 CSB, and he was he was the first corporal medic who kind of gave me a lowdown about being an integrated medic. And then so coming in he was now my sergeant. So he was a guy, and it would turn out through my career, he's literally in nearly every one of my postings as a senior and a mentor. And brilliant medic, brilliant guy. Anyway, very polarizing sometimes, but he's very good at what he did, and he was a really good person to kind of angle who I should aim to be like. Anyway, so he comes in, my sergeant, calls me in, and we just talk about the plan. He allocates me to A Company, which I found amusing because I just come out of A Squadron, so now going into A Company. And when I was coming in is when the unit was talking about the name change. So it was coming down the pipeline, but it wasn't there yet. So it was funny because I marched into 4RR, got all the badges, wearing... At the time we wore the blue beret with the medical corps badge, and same all the lanyards and the honours and awards, everything you had to get. Anyway, then obviously the unit changes names. I now got to wear a blue beret with a commando badge, so I don't get to wear my med badge anymore. I just wore the supporter badge, which is neither here nor there to me, honestly. But so it was for a lot of the guys, obviously it was a big change for me because I didn't really know any better. I came in, I was 4RR for I think 6 months, and then I was 2 Commando. But yeah, when I came in, I was, like I said, I was allocated to A Company, and I was then actually offered a deployment before A Company was going. But I chose, I would have had to move companies, but I actually chose to stay because I was going to be in A Company for 12 months leading up to our deployment, which would give me time to get all my skills, my bearings, and my training, because now we have a much better model of how we integrate key support staff, so medics, SIGs, engineers, and boaties. Now they go through a pipeline of what's called a tactical integration course, where you learn how operators do their business. Not to be an operator, and I'm always very clear about this, it's not to be an operator, it's how they do their job and how you can integrate with them and understand and not get in the way and get you or someone else killed. But there's very strict pipeline, so you do that course. We have a specialist medic course when you arrive, where you learn advanced skills and scenarios and put people through their paces. And there's a number of other courses, parachuting, all these roping, this stuff. That didn't exist when I came in. It was literally you got into your company, whatever your company was focused on at the time is what they trained you for. So we were focused on deployment. So I didn't get para because I didn't need it. I got roping. They taught me how to employ my weapon systems effectively, how to move through the teams. All of that was done by the company themselves. And once again, not to make me an operator, just to make sure I could, when we got overseas, I was effective and I wouldn't get someone killed. And I could defend myself. So that I had 12 months, so I didn't want to rush that, and I liked the company I was actually in. So also I got stabbed to go do my sergeant's course because I was a senior corporal by then. So I had to disappear, do a sergeant's course, and then come back, all in lead up for Afghanistan. So I literally had a 12-month lead up for Afghanistan.
So busy trip, and busy time in arriving at Commando, and Commando is absolutely going.
Oh, they were full sprint.
This is nuts.
They were full sprint.
Yeah, this is deployment after deployment, and they're losing guys. On like they'd lost
Mark and Luke by then.
Yeah, so Luke in 2007, Jason Marks in 2008, and then the crystal ball. If you had seen what had happened, and we're going to talk about this now, which is, for the listener, this is a really hard period where Damo is about to talk about some really hard trauma, and when you hear the next sort of 18 months of his life is really heavy trauma, and I want to thank him for even opening up to me about it, because I understand it is not easy. So, and we'll get into this now, mate. So, shortly after you got to 4RR, now to Commando, on the 20th of October 2009, Corporal Mason Edwards died when he was shot in the head by small arms fire that passed through a wall that he was crouching behind during a live ammunition training drill at Cultana Range Training Area as part of the MRE, and the IAAR, now SOA, engineer was hit with him at the time. You were on the ground that day, or that evening. I've had Andy Steele, so episode 114, he was Mason's team commander, and Kurt Ludke, episode 133. They were there. They spoke about that day. Mate, you worked on Mason. From your eyes, talk me through what happened.
Yeah, so like as you mentioned, we were doing night training as a part of our MRE, so our mission ready exercise. So this is, for those who don't know, it's for us getting ready to go to Afghanistan. At the time, I was, like, as always, as a killer, I'm a part of the PHQ, so the platoon headquarters element. So we were sitting outside the area that the event occurred. So we were sitting off-site where the platoon commander controls, obviously, his teams with inside, in this case, a target area. Obviously, the teams rolled through to engage their target buildings, and we get a no-dive call over the radio. We moved centralised to figure out what had actually happened, because obviously there's no duff, someone's gone down, we're coming in to find out what's happened. We get brought over to the scene by Andy, and went around the corner, I obviously saw the two casualties. At the time, it was a little bit surreal, because obviously when you're in Australia, you do medical training scenarios, and up before this, I'd already gone through all the SOCOM medical training, where we do very intense medical training in preparation for deployments. So, and I didn't think it was fake, because obviously I knew it was a no-duff, but it was very surreal to be happening in Australia. Obviously, I pushed aside. I didn't even recognise Mason because of the head injury was so severe. When I got there, the guys had already started working on Mason and the engineer. I can't say his name. And I obviously then took command of the scene because I was the senior clinician. Once again, it's crazy in some regards, because unlike when someone gets injured in a war zone, people have got jobs to do. So things need to be done. So you're treating, you're getting the help you need, but this is very different. I literally had a whole platoon of commandos standing around wanting to help, couldn't help because you can only have so many hands on someone. So essentially I just had all these people standing around looking at me to help their friend. Put all that aside, I obviously had a CFA, had started work on the engineer who'd had an entry and exit in his arm, and he actually had his MVG knocked off his helmet. So he actually was nearly a headshot as well.
Wow.
It was literally inches before losing his head as well. And it is what it is. So the CFA was working on him. I obviously took control of Mason. time, like I said, I didn't realise Mason, but I obviously knew I had a casualty with a severe head injury, and his airway was my priority. I knew he had I could see no other gunshots, but I wanted to stabilise his airway. As I started to actually work on him, I realised it was Mason. And I'd actually formed a bond with Mason by this point. He, when I come into the company, he was new back into the company as well, from into the teams, because he was obviously doing some other stuff outside of the teams for a little bit. He awesome to me. Helped me, like couldn't hit a barn with a pistol when I got there. He taught me how to shoot properly, helped me learn how to be an integrator. Had already told me by that point, we'd had beers a couple of times, talked about he'll keep an eye on me, watch my back for me when we get overseas. So I knew Mason, but I had to put all those feelings aside. You can't let that affect your judgments. So I started to work on the casualty in front of me. I secured Mason's airway, and I had got an airway in, and then I wanted to do a quick pat down to check if he had any other injury. I could clearly see he had an injury. If someone was trying to treat his head wounds, I was moving down to check he had no other life-threatening injuries. As I started to do that, he stops breathing. So once again, when it comes to treating someone in a war zone, you have to make decisions on survivability. This was not that, and it meant we had no enemy threat. There was no threat to us, so it meant I knew I could holus bolus go in on Mason, so I straight away started doing CPR on him. I had a couple of guys jump in, start doing CPR. I started running drugs. We were waiting for an evac. I'd been informed once we commenced CPR that we could not get an AME to our location because it was a live range and aircraft couldn't come in. So we got the Bushmaster ambulance, loaded Mason into the back. Andy jumped in as his team leader and a couple of the other guys to help me do CPR while I was running drugs and running an airway. So we were in transit for, felt like an eternity, but I think it worked out to be 30 minutes transit where we could get out of the range where we could actually meet the care flight helicopter. Once we got out, arrived at the AME, I handed him over to the medical officer at the time and gave him all the information and pronounced him DOA. And look, I knew that was coming, but obviously it was hard.
Oh, cool.
So I returned, obviously, from there. I got taken straight back to the base we're working out of inside the MRE. I was told down tools because they obviously an investigation had to be launched. I still remember, vividly remember I came back and I was soaked in Mason's blood in my uniform because we were actually running cry cams that were approved for us to wear but weren't funded by ADF. We had to buy our own sets. I only had one set on me at the time, so I had to borrow someone else's clothes because I was literally soaked in Mason's blood. And that sits with me a lot. Is I always remember just coming back, having to tell the guys that he's passed away, and I'm just soaked in his blood. Obviously, and then post that we went through the round and we had to finish out the exercise, but there wasn't really much left to finish. It was kind of wrapped up pretty quickly. We've gone through interviews. We had to do a couple of little things just to get us out of there and ticked off, ready to deploy. We obviously then went straight into they put us through critical incident counselling to check that we were then ready to go still.
And as you say, mate, that deployments, this is what you guys live for. You're going to say all the right things to deploy, and you're mentally, you're compartmentalised, you're doing a job. But mate, that must have been very hard because you had a personal attachment to Mace. You knew him. This is a mate that you're working on, that you did everything humanly possible to bring him back, but just the injury was just too severe for him to live.
Yeah, I mean, you hit an nail on the head, and I was the same as the other guys. Obviously, it was really hard, but I wasn't going to tell the Sykes I couldn't deploy, and I felt like I could deploy. I learned from when I was young and being picked on a lot, and like we spoke about earlier, I learned to compartmentalise from an early age to just put it over in a box over there, put a lid on it, it's not a problem. So I did that with Mason. Initially, it was I struggled a little bit initially, but then I just put it in the box. I wasn't gonna let the guys down. I was going on the deployment. They need me, and I needed to go, and I wanted to go. So I just said what I needed to say to get through my screenings, and then we came back. We went on Christmas leave a couple of weeks later, came back, and then we deployed in February.
So do you, as the company, there's a massive effect because this is, as you know, mate, you've been in this space, and before Mason, I'll go 1996, the Black Hawk incident with the SAS where the guys were killed. You guys push it to the limit, like you're pushing it. That's the job. It's a dangerous job. But it's still a shock when it's on home soil. As you said, you're not in a war zone. You're not expecting in a training lead up to deploy to happen. Do you and the company, you go to and attend his funeral, and what was that like?
Yeah, so 100%. So I think it hit a lot of people pretty hard because exactly like you said, everyone expects someone to die on a deployment. You don't want it, but it's an expectation. You need to be realistic. No one expects it in training. So I think that hit a lot of guys pretty hard. It hit me hard. Mason had some very close friends that really rocked. We obviously, post the event, we did attend his funeral, and I was actually a part of the Honour Guard. So I was the only non-shooter, a part of the Honour Guard, who did Mason's funeral. I just felt I had to be a part of it. Looking back on it, probably shouldn't have been because my drill is terrible, and I think I probably looked the worst out there. But I just had to be a part of it on Mason, and my platoon commander, the Alpha, he fully supported it. All the shooters fully supported it, and like I said, I was the only blue beret in that crowd who marched him to lay him to rest, and it was something I just knew I needed to be a part of. So we did it. We obviously post event we did his funeral, and then it was, I think just after that we went on Christmas leave.
Yeah, and go back and listen to Andy and Kurt talk about mentally they said it themselves that they were rocked, but you've got to deploy. Like, you've got a deployment coming up, and if you all had a crystal ball made of what was about to happen when Afghanistan, when you get there in 2010, the crystal ball, like you wouldn't have seen the next traumas that you would have all faced, and our company, moving forward after 2010 as well, did not have a good time with helicopters, and we're going to talk about that now. So you have your Christmas leave, Mace, you send him off in the best way that you can and honour, your mate. You get over to Afghanistan, mate. You deployed to East Timor. Different scenario. This is your things. And I don't take anything away from East Timor. You know what I'm trying to say here. That East Timor there was risk, but Afghanistan is next level. People are dying. There's IEDs. We're losing casualties. Oh, sorry, we are losing people like no tomorrow over there when you're deployed. What was it like when you got over there for the first time in Afghanistan?
Yeah, and you're right. It's obviously quite different to Timor's peacekeeping. I think one of the first things that made me realise, not that I didn't realise we weren't in for the ship, but we arrived, allocated rooms, starting to get settled in to start doing missions. And me and my one of my roommates, who's the JTAC, went to the gym and we're doing a workout and we could hear Apaches doing gun runs in the distance. And I'm just like, this isn't Timor, this is war. This is the serious business. And like I said, I did know that, but it obviously definitely cements that in your head. But look, Alpha Company hit the ground, and we hit the ground hard. We obviously, when we arrived, initially we were doing ground-based operations in vehicles. It was just how the command was doing some mission profiles at the time. Within, I think it was our second mission out, we hit an IED on the vehicle, lost the vehicle, no injuries luckily. And then preceding that, I think it was maybe one or two missions later, we then hit another IED and it actually one of the few IEDs that penetrated the Bushmaster's hull, and we got 3 casualties from that. So we were doing it wasn't actually a platoon one, it was a company move between some forward operating bases, and the lead vehicle, the scouts, the sniper vehicle, they actually hit a road-based IED. Vehicle breach, the driver was injured, the sergeant, so the Bravo, he was injured seriously, and one of the snipers who was on top of the car looking out for, like, obviously spotters, was ejected.
Oh,
yeah, he was ejected, I think it was a good 50 metres from the vehicle. So that was my first. I'd actually had another incident before then, but I can't really talk about that one. But so that one, I was lucky enough to have that sergeant I mentioned previously. He was there because it was a company move. So me and him got cleared forward by engineers. We obviously started treating the casualties. Luckily, everyone was seriously injured, but manageable, and we backed them out. It wasn't long after that we actually stopped doing ground-based operations and moved to aero missions. Yeah, so we hit the ground pretty hard, and then during that time we had an agreement. So the special operations guys had an agreement, and I know Mick Slattery talked about it on his pass. We had an agreement that for Australian casualties, we would try to have an Australian on the dust-off crew, so the US AME crews. So we would always have one of the Special Forces medics or nurses or doctors cycling through the AME teams and doing runs. And we did it for the US and that too, but we always tried to make sure if there was an Aussie, we'd get an Aussie on the bird. And the US guys were really great. Regular Army wasn't doing it. They weren't allowed. It was only the Special Forces guys. It was just the agreement that was made at the time. I'm not saying the regular Army guys couldn't have done it. It was just the agreement made. So I did 2 of those shifts, and this was my first shift. So I was on shift, had just dealt with that IED incident, I think it was maybe a week in between, and I rotated onto my shift to work with the dust-off crew, and we get a call of a mass CAS. So we obviously make our way up to the CAS Reg Cell, who coordinate how they evacuate people, because what a lot of people don't realise is obviously Afghanistan was quite a large area of operations with a lot of overarching countries and support. So what the CAS Reg Cell would do would be they would determine where the casualty was. They would then determine where the evacuation asset came from and then where it went to, because we had Role 1s, Role 2s and Role 3s. So a Role 1 is just a resus team. A Role 2 can give surgery, but they'd have limited holding and limited surgical capabilities. And a Role 3 is where we give full surgery, blood, recovery, ICU, all that stuff. So and if it was a really bad day, you could have casualties flying to a Role 1 just to be stabilised, then be flown to a Role 3. So that's what the CAS Reg Cell's job was to do. So anyway, so we went to this US CAS Reg Cell, and we're getting reports of a mass casualty. But to make things worse, the vehicle that had been hit by a ground IED was actually the headquarters vehicle for that call sign. So it was a Dutch call sign, and their headquarters vehicle was taken out. What had actually happened was the Dutch didn't have ECMs on all their vehicles to counteract remote-controlled IEDs. They had it on their combat vehicles, but not on some of their other vehicles. And this vehicle, the headquarters vehicle, was sitting between 2 vehicles with ECMs. So they rolled over the IED, not detonated, but then the vehicles had separated enough that the remote IED could be initiated and took out this Dutch command vehicle.
And for the civilian listeners, Dana, I'll put in here, it's like a blocker, isn't it? So it stops that signal getting to that
100%.
That
so the
device.
ECM is designed to stop remote-controlled IEDs and used to great effect in Afghanistan. So this vehicle's gone. So the CAS Reg Cell is getting multiple 9-liners from on the ground because people are panicked. And look, it's a mass casualty, rightly so. So we don't know how many casualties we had. We're getting reports of between 4 and 8. So the US team make the decision that they're going to launch 2 assets. normally they wouldn't launch your assets without 9-liners and miss, but they're just going to launch these 2 assets, these 2 helicopters to get to the scene and try and help these people.
So just want to jump in there. So a 9-liner for a civilian, can you explain what a 9-liner is?
Yeah, so a 9-liner is the medical request for help.
Right.
So it's broken up into 9 lines of information. It contains your location, the amount of casualties you have, the severity of the casualties you have, any specialist equipment you require, the terrain. I won't go through all 9 lines, but it is the information they need to know what sort of support you need.
Yep.
And then the MIST is the medical information about each casualty. So we know this casualty needs surgery, this casualty just broke their leg, they can wait a little bit longer, this casualty's been shot in the chest, they need to go to surgery now.
So is that where it breaks down, where you got Cat A, Cat B?
Correct.
That's how it breaks down?
Yeah,
so
100%. Right. In the 9-liner, they always say we have 2 Cat A, 2 Cat B, 2 Cat C.
Right.
And then they will send a MIST with each person's medical information detailed.
Yep.
So that way you could potentially, one scene could have 4 helicopters coming to it from different areas to take casualties back to different areas.
Yeah, right. And I wanted to break that down for the like military get it.
Yeah.
Civilian listener doesn't. So yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
No, and it's fully understandable. And look, that's the job of the CASREG cell. Like they get that information, they make these decisions. So we didn't have all that information, but at the time there wasn't like a lot of AMEs weren't being requested, so they made the call to send 2 assets, and they knew they could then follow up as required. So I got allocated to one of the assets, and the US guy, one of the US medics got allocated to the other. On initial startup of the birds, the US guy's helicopter failed. So he had a engine fault. So they made the call that the US medic would jump back onto one of our gunships. So the AME assets never went anywhere without a gunship, because while they're on the ground, a bird's circling, keeping them safe. They made the decision, bump him back. They make a temporary AME, and me and him would hit the scene, and we'd just have 1 gunship instead of 2 in the air. So we do. So we launch, and we head towards the location of the Dutch incident. On approach, we get cleared to land. We get waved into an area, the only possible area we could actually land in. When we land, we then had an engineer come over and tell the US pilot that the area had not been cleared for secondary IEDs. And he was not happy, because the way it works is a very old tactic used throughout the years is they would put an IED on a main road, strike the vehicles, and then have a secondary IED waiting for response vehicles. So we were in the only place we could have possibly landed. So luckily for us, we didn't blow up on landing. And then the engineer had to sweep the area to check it was safe. So we're sitting there turning and burning because the pilots didn't want to risk taking off and detonating an IED. So he had to, they searched the area, then searched the path too. So we were sitting on ground for probably 10 minutes, and the pilots were losing their minds. They don't like it. It's a big, expensive, static target that enemies love to target. So they're never on ground for long. So anyway, so they finally cleared to the Dutch to get these casualties to us. When they were bringing down the first CAS, as I was the primary AME asset, they were bringing it to me first. I remember seeing this CAS coming, and when they loaded him in, I could see he had a traumatic ankle injury, but besides that, he seemed fine. I asked the Dutch medic for a handover, didn't speak English, so I couldn't get a handover. Couldn't read his notes. I was like, cool. I just accepted him and I started my own assessment. When I was assessing him, I thought at the time, this is the worst they have. This might not be too bad. So I'm checking. He's they'd obviously dealt with the ankle injury, checking for secondary injuries, any other fragmentation, gunshot wounds, anything like that. Airway stable. As that's occurring, they're bringing some walking casualties to the secondary AME because it wasn't set up as a proper AME asset, so they took the walking casualties. I then see the next casualty coming, and as soon as I saw him, I knew it was not great. He had obvious traumatic chest wounds. He had a tracheostomy in place. He didn't look great. Same again, couldn't get a handover, couldn't understand notes, so I accepted the casualty, got him in the asset, told the pilots we need to launch straight away and get him to either Tarankow or Kandahar because he needed immediate intervention. When I started to do my assessment on him, I realised that they'd actually knocked the tracheostomy out of his airway, so he now had no airway. So it happened, I don't know when it happened, but it happened either on the stretcher carry or when being loaded into the helicopter, but his tracheostomy has now come out. Looks like it's in, but when I assessed it, I realised it wasn't. So immediately I removed it because I didn't know how it was compromised, and I inserted my own, got his airway back. I then realised he's no longer breathing. So I was left with the decision about whether I start CPR on this casualty or whether I don't. And I made the call that I couldn't start CPR effectively in where I was. I also had another casualty I had to treat. So I made the call that CPR wasn't to be started, and I didn't start it. And that's it's a decision that I still struggle with today, whether I should have made that decision or not. We obviously arrived at Tarankout. I handed over both my casualties to the MO there, and he obviously pronounced the casualty dead on arrival, and then took ownership of the second casualty. We flew back to the scene of the ID site for a secondary run for casualties once we fueled up. On arrival, same thing again. This time it had actually been cleared properly. I got the last casualty off the scene, who was actually a spinal. Same, couldn't get a handover, just accept the casualty, started my own assessment. The chase bird, the makeshift AME, then took the KIA off the scene for them. It wasn't always something that it wasn't required to be done, but they always did it when they could, just to obviously so the call sign didn't have to travel with the KIA. Once again, we returned to Tarankout and handed over the casualty, and then we returned to base. I was pretty upset when I returned to base because no CCP, so no casualty collection point had been done on scene, we found out later, so they were just throwing the casualties at us. So instead of determining who needed help first, and then obviously with the error with the tracheostomy and then losing someone who may have survived, may not have, I was pretty upset. But I also had to recognise that it was a difficult time for them, the Dutch team as well. And it was just things go sideways, and I guess it is what it was. So anyway, that was all within my first couple of months of being in Afghanistan.
So kinetic just hit basically from Mason's death, a kinetic period of your life that is just, and you're compartmentalising, you, as you've just said, you're not coping well, like it didn't sit well with you. And we're not even, like, this next part it's even tougher for you. And you just, obviously you're putting that away and going, I'll deal with that later. Like, I'll just crack on, I'm here, and I've just got to stay mission focused.
Yeah, so, and I like I said, I haven't even there's a couple other instances where some other stuff happened I haven't mentioned, I'm not going to talk about, but yeah, by that point, like, the Dutch event happened end of March, so I'd literally been in country not even 2 months by this point. And I'd seen in excess of 10 plus people running solo. So yeah, look, I just viewed it as my job. I think that was just my brain, like you said. I was just putting it. I wasn't even putting it, compartmentalizing it, even thinking about doing that. I was just automatically doing it. I'm here. I'm in Afghanistan. This is my job, and that's how I just viewed it. I like all the guys, everyone has different ways of decompressing post jobs. I would just we'd get back. We'd refit for the next gig, make sure you're good to go, got your shit squared away, get ready for the next round of planning, and I'd just chill watching movies, like funny movies, shit that makes me laugh. I just do things like that back in my bed space and just doing things that just, I guess, looking back on it now, I realise it's probably just making me feel human, making me laugh, making me not think about this stuff. But at the time, I wasn't doing it as a coping mechanism. I think I was just instinctively doing that.
But what that shows me is you're human as well, mate, because you're in a war zone that is not, it's the very worst of places to be, and these incidents are happening, and I'd be a bit worried if you didn't go away and try and just just go and watch a movie that you can get yourself away from what's happening outside the wire. Like, that's, like, that is I'm glad you did that, because otherwise I'd be like, Damo, are you okay? Like, there's, like, if you're just, and, like, are you also, with that coping, are you training as well? Like, you're still keeping up, like, going to the gym and doing all that, trying to just not, like, look at what's happening when you're not on mission?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you couldn't not, like, because obviously when you're out on gigs doing patrols, all that, like, it's hard work and you're definitely exercising, but it's you need to train outside that, otherwise you start to atrophy in different ways. And so I was still, like, the JTAC I mentioned earlier, who was my roommate, me and him gym every day. So get up, we'd hit the gym every day. We'd do, like, training the day had planned, like, within the teams and stuff like that. And then in the evenings, you just chill out and you're just readying for the next mission. Sometimes it'd be a week between missions. Sometimes it'd be maybe a little bit more. Rarely. It was only a few days to a week between missions. So, I actually came back from Afghan pretty fit. Fit. I was fit when I went, because to even be allowed to go as support staff, you had to pass the commander fitness tests, so they knew you were fit enough to be there. It's not like a lot of units, you just get attached and go. No, like, I had to pass fitness tests to be there, and I maintained while I was there, because the guys are beasts. Like, they push hard the whole time, so you got to be able to keep up. And I'm carrying heavy loads. Like, during the Battle of Shawali Kot, my pack weighed 50 kilos, because we needed food and water, and I also then needed food, water, ammo, and then I needed a med kit on top of that. So my pack literally weighed, because you have to, before you get on helicopters, you have to weigh yourself, so they can distribute the load properly. And my pack for Shawali Kot weighed 50 kilos, and I got to keep up with these guys. And they're running heavy packs too, obviously. But it's not for the faint of heart.
No, well, mate, I've spoken to a few SIGs as well that have said that. Yeah. SIGs
I don't envy a SIG, mate. Medics run heavy kit, but SIGs run heavy as shit.
Yeah, that's that. And like a signaller, like they've said, like infantry boys carry gear, but we're just as heavy, if not heavier, with all the SIG gear that they've got on, and like you guys as well. And you, like, it's like, you're pretty, like, you were fit, and it's like, as you say, for the civilian listener, you guys are working in altitudes of over 3,000 meters above that with altitude, so it's arduous, like. And some of the guys that I've had on the podcast have said that that's why they do selection, is because of they could draw back on those days when they were tired, hungry, in the field, go, this is why we do selection. And you were attached and you had to be fit as well. Like, it was arduous work what you were doing over there.
Oh, mate, there were some hard days. Like, I know it's been mentioned in a podcast before, but we did Shawali Kot, 60-degree days when I was up on a mountain as well as part of the PHQ. And then when we exfilled, it was a 15K exfill. We didn't just get out and get on a helicopter. We exfilled, we had to we had to hit a village on the way out and then fish hook out. So I was well and truly, after that gig, I was well and truly cooked coming out.
We mentioned Shawali Kot, and so Shawali Kot, I've had a number of guys on, and then we're going to get to the incident that happened just after Shawali Kot.
Yeah.
Did you have any, because I still cannot believe, mate, that there was no KIAs from Shawali Kot, like, from fighting, like, what you and the Saskats did, how there was no one got killed in that battle. It's beyond, like, how. Like,
no, it's actually been a bit of a running commentary over the years. Like, we survived the biggest battle on it with no casualties, and then a week later we lose nearly half a platoon. Well, actually, it's pretty much half a platoon. Yeah, look, Shawali Kot, I was the same as Kurt, actually, so I was part of the PHQ element. I wasn't with Kurt, but I was a PHQ element, so that we were up in the hills on one of the mountaintops, but ours wasn't one of the target one. We we got hit a little bit, nothing compared to, like, some of the sniper call signs. They got they were in the thick of it. And so Shawali Kot, honestly, it was hard and hot. I remember, I think it was day 3 when I was running out of water. I was and I've talked to people about this before, this is a mindset you got to be in, is I was considering bottling my piss to drink because I was coming up to my last couple of litres and there was no word of if we could get a resupply or not. So I was like, fuck, I'm going to have to bottle my piss today because I may have to drink it. Which is glad I didn't have to do that. Very glad. I'm like literally got the resupply that night, so super glad I didn't have to do that. But it was just the mindset you have to have.
And that's something that John Wynne said, where John Wynne talks about that he ran out of water virtually on the first day. And
yeah, some boys were running light water, but yeah, I always made sure I had my 3 days of freedom water.
Wild, mate, that you... And to even think that, mate, to go, I've got to bottle my piss, like, that is... It doesn't get more desperate than that. Like, you know, and from a medical perspective, I want to talk to you about that, because can you survive if you...
No, not really, but it's got some... Look, you could... like it would mildly sustain you, but there's not a lot in there you need. Like, it was just... I was just like... This is like, it's better than drinking dirt, if you want to put in those contexts. Arguably, health-wise, definitely not good for you. Probably get pretty sick from it, and I get very minimal hydration from it. But we were waking up. I had a watch that at the time that was like give you the rough temperature, and I was waking up and it was 30+ degrees before the sun was coming up, mate. It was fucking. It was on the tops of the mountains. She was cooking.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, and you're not putting up shade because you're not making yourself a target. So the photo I'll share with you for the podcast is actually me sitting on top of that's actually from the Ballast.
Oh right,
right. Is where I was sitting on what you'd arguably call the shadier side of the mountain at the time. Just
not much shade.
Trying to stay out of the gunfight a bit in the shade as best I could. But yeah.
So that was a tough few days for you, and then mate, a day that you are never gonna forget is we're talking about the Dutch incident. We've spoken about the Bushmaster incident, Mason's death. Now we're going into what is probably the toughest time for you. As well, they're all tough, but you know what I'm trying to say here. That this. On a mass scale, this is huge. And the 21st of June 2010, where a Black Hawk spuds in, Mascaz, mate, talk me through this day. Were you back at TK and had heard that this had happened, or talk me through this day and you then getting on the ground and what you were faced with when you got on the ground?
Yeah, so that I was a part of the actual incident. I was actually on site when it occurred. So as you spoke about, we're on final approach to a target, and due to lack of coordination between the air crew, the aircraft struck the ground and immediately went into a spin. When it occurred, they estimated it was going over 250 k's an hour because we're on final approach. They'll come in fast and low. When it struck the ground, the fuselage then started to tumble and then caught on fire when it came to rest. And that was over when it started tumbling and throwing out casualties, they estimated it was about 150 metre spread, the area. The biggest thing that saved a lot of people's lives that day, 2 things. Was first, guys had helmets because they had NVGs, and they had actually unclipped because they were ready to disembark to hit the target, because normally when you come in under gunfire. Because of that, guys were actually getting thrown out of the helicopter. If they'd all been strapped in, they would have continued to be strapped in, and then the fuselage would have caught on fire. The helicopter that crashed was actually half of some of our snipers and the other half of our headquarters element. Normally we actually travel as a whole, the headquarters element, but what actually happened was because of the heavy weight of the loads, they actually had to redistribute where people were sitting, and half of headquarters got put in that helicopter and half in the one behind. I was actually meant to be in the helicopter that crashed, but I was bumped into the helicopter behind. When the incident occurred, we didn't actually know what had happened. All we knew was we had a downed helo. So the platoon commander got the remaining helicopters to go into a hover pattern and start circling the area looking for an enemy threat. At the time, he also then used that time to give some orders to the guys about what we were going to do with the fallen angel. I actually wasn't on comms because there's not enough headsets to go around. So team leaders are on comms, I'm not. So I didn't actually know I didn't even know it happened because I was facing out of the aircraft. So when we were circling, I was on the out. I didn't realise we had a downed asset.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So when we touched down, I obviously jumped out ready for get into contact, and there's a crashed helicopter there. I can still vividly remember the burning wreckage. Could hear people screaming out for help. We obviously touched down as close as we safely could, but we still had to run in. I started running in. As I approached the area, I actually stopped and started walking to calm myself down and get my breath back. It's one of the things you learn in training is you've got to approach these scenes as calm as you can. Any emergency response, military or civilian, it's key part of the learning.
Yep.
So I started approaching the area. My platoon commander told me he was going to run ahead of me and he was coordinating the security of the area, so he was using our partnering force that was actually, Afghanistan partnering force that was in my aircraft with us. He used them to put out a cordon around the area with some commandos in charge. We then sent the only other, I had a CFA on the helicopter with me. He went to the far extreme side of the rolls, and then I took the side closest to the wreckage. My platoon commander, like I said, started moving ahead of me, and his plan was to try and guide me to the most severe casualties. So as I moved into the scene, when it comes to treating mass casualty events like this, the concept is the greatest good for the greatest number. So it's all based off survivability, and those who won't survive are given less treatment than those that will survive. And it sounds cold to those who obviously aren't trained or haven't had to live through it, but it's the goal of it is to save as many people as we possibly can. Because someone who is quite seriously injured, who may not survive, can consume a lot of people and resources that could go to someone who might survive if just given a little bit of help. So that's the concept of it. And it's a very difficult concept as a clinician to get your head around, because you spend your life training to save everybody, and then now all of a sudden you have to make a decision on who gets treated and not. So obviously that's the mindset I had to take on when I went in. When I approached, the first casualty I actually came across was one of the US aircrew guys. His legs were messed up, open fractures on both legs. He was in a lot of pain, but when it comes to doing mass casualties, the things you need to assess is, are they catastrophically bleeding? Do they have a compromised airway? And are they breathing? So I assessed him, checked he had no arterial bleeds. I quickly figure eighted his feet together just so the fractures wouldn't move anymore. Cleared his airway, checked his breathing, put him in the recovery position, told him someone will be back to help him as soon as possible. I quickly wrote the number 1 on him, and then I wrote number 1 in my book and just wrote a quick, very rough what was wrong with him so I could keep track. I then moved on to my next casualty. When I got to him, he was one of the commandos. I won't mention his name. He had severe facial injuries and injuries to his legs. Same thing though, I checked him, he wasn't catastrophic bleeding, airway was secure, and he was stable. There wasn't much I could actually do for him at that time, so I put him in the recovery position and told him I'd be back. I then moved forward, and the platoon commander called me over. When I got to him, I said I needed a CCP because the guys were spread out over such a large distance. Because once again we didn't know what had happened, he made the call to make multiple CCPs so he could have them close enough together that I could get to help people, but far enough apart if we took enemy fire, they were defendable. He also informed me that there was 2 KIA who had been moved off to the side that I didn't need to obviously deal with it at that time. He then directed me to the next casualty. When I approached it, I realised it was Tim Applin. Like I spoke about earlier, I actually knew Tim from the beginning of my career. when I got to 4RR, Tim actually saw me down the breezeway and yelled out to me, and we caught up. I knew his family. I hadn't met his family, but I knew about his family. We'd had beers a couple of times. I knew Tim well. But I had to put that aside. I couldn't let that impact I couldn't let it freeze me up, and I couldn't let me impact what I did with him. Tim was unconscious though, so first thing I did was I did what it's called a couple of different things. Some people call it a blood sweep, some people call it a trauma pat down. Either way, I looked for an injury to determine why he was unconscious. As I was patting him down, I found that his leg had actually been amputated. So you couldn't tell it had been amputated, but what happened when he'd impacted the ground with such shearing force, it amputated his leg. But his cams are intact. So I obviously, first thing I did, I got a combat application tourniquet, or a CAT as it's called. I applied that to control the bleeding. As I was applying that, Tim had been breathing when I arrived, or as I was applying the tourniquet, I realised he had stopped breathing. So I went up, secured his airway with what's called an OPA, so an oropharyngeal airway, and gave him some quick breaths to see if I could get a response out of him. And I had no response. Concurrently, I could actually see one of the other commandos bleeding out of an arterial femoral bleed. So I had to make the call what to do. And I had to make the call to not treat him.
Take your time, mate.
Yeah, thanks.
Take your time.
I rolled Tim into the recovery position. I told him I was sorry, I have to go. And then I'm left. I got to next casualty, and it was actually Pete Rudland.
Previous guest on the podcast.
Yeah. I was hesitant whether to say his name, but I realised he would be fine with it.
Yep.
So it was Pete Rudland. So he was bleeding out of a femoral bleed, so I got a tourniquet on him. But Pete had actually taken a blow to the head as well from the crash, and he was trying to get up to help guys. He didn't realise he was so hurt. He obviously had other injuries as well, but his femoral bleed was... So I got the tourniquet on, controlled that, had to pretty much fight him down to get it on, because he was just trying to get up to help people, because that was his job. He was a sergeant, and he just wanted to help. So once I got that on, I got it controlled, and then I calmed him down, told him he was injured. We were treating the casualties, and I'd get someone to him soon to get him out of here. Once I'd said that, he actually calmed down. I then got called over by one of the other guys who was trying to help another commando, and concurrently, as that was happening, I could hear comms telling me we had one of the helicopters want to touch down and take casualties. Our SOP, so our standard operating procedure for a mass CAS event like this of a fallen angel, was if we were too far, if AME was going to take too long to get to us, we will use our internal assets to get our casualties off scene back to high help, which is a common standard of practice. So one of the integral assets, Black Hawks, landed, disembarked commandos that were used to start securing our area and also help where required. But obviously, once again, security was paramount because we didn't know what had happened. One of the CFAs got off, and I told him he was going to get straight back on because he needed to go with the casualties. I had started assessing another casualty who was actually one of the commanders coughing up blood. Couldn't find injuries anywhere on him, but I was wary because of him coughing up blood and what injuries he may have sustained internally that I couldn't control. So I told the CFA to take him, and I then selected a couple other guys that I'd already seen, Pete and a couple of others, and they need to be put on the asset and flown back to the Kandahar Air Base, which had our Roll 3 there, which is where we were sending casualties to. Once that aircraft lifted off, I then started moving towards, by this point, I nearly said his name, the platoon commander had set up the CCPs, so I was moving to one of the other CCPs to start assessing other casualties. Got there, once again, I recognised he was actually one of our interpreters. He's a great guy. I had spent a lot of time with him, but he looks bad. He had blood all over him, blood all over his head from a facial injury, but I assessed him and he was stable. So I marked him, told him I'd be back when we could. I then got called over to the next casualty by my JTAC. When I got there, I realised it was actually Gary Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
He's a super, good mate, one of my best mates. At the time, we'd been sharing a room for months, knew him before the deployment. He'd been there with me with Meso. He was getting married when he got returned. I knew his then fiancée, soon to be wife. I knew a lot about this man. But same thing, I had to put that to the side and just deal with the casualty in front of me. I did a sweep. He had obvious broken bones and a couple of deformities, but no major blood loss. But he was unconscious, so I tried to secure his airway. As I tried to open his airway, I realised that his airway wouldn't open, and he was in a seizure. So when it impacted, what we've discovered later, when the helicopter impacted, he took a blow to the head, obviously severe injuries. He actually instinctively crawled away from the burning wreckage till someone grabbed him and then finished dragging him away, and then he went unconscious. So I gave him an anti-seizure medication and put into nasopharyngeal airways, so he had some form of airway. I then got told the second helicopter was touching down, I was going to start taking more casualties. I was left with a decision about what I should do with Gary. I made the choice to put him on that asset because there was nothing I could actually do for him further on scene. I told the CFA what I'd done, and they needed to obviously keep an eye on him, keep his airway open, and because he obviously had a head injury. I had assumed he had a head injury, and he needed surgery to relieve the pressure.
So, just to cut in for a sec there, CFA for the non-military, Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so a CFA is what we call as a combat first aider.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone in the military gets what's called Army First Aid. So it's like your first aid courses you get in workplaces. Then we have what's called a combat first aid with more advanced skill sets, and they're an interim between an AFA and a medic. So, because there's not enough medics everywhere, we have CFAs. So, for example, I'll use a makeup of a Special Forces team. Every team has a CFA. Mm-hmm. So that way when an event occurs, the CFA responds, and then the medic is then brought forward to then take over as the senior clinician. Mm-hmm. CFAs in Big Army versus Special Forces are different. The SASR use PAFAs. Commandos have 1 point use PAFAs, 1 point use advanced CFA. It twos and fro's. It's very political. But the CFAs within Special Forces are actually upskilled to a higher level than what's across Big Army. Mm-hmm. So they can do things like a needle decompression, for example, which a standard CFA couldn't do at the time, and some other advanced skill sets. So they are our way to project health forward in a kinetic environment where you can't always necessarily send a medic. But yeah, so in this case, I was the senior clinician on scene, so I couldn't leave. So we were using the CFAs in the helicopters to provide give more medical attention to these people. Mm-hmm. And something I'd actually failed to mention earlier is a standard aeromedical Black Hawk will take 2 lying casualties and 1 sitting casualty only. In this incident, because we had 15 casualties and we had limited assets, we were putting about 5 to 6 people on each asset. So they were laying shoulder to shoulder, essentially, with the CFA in there, treating them the best they could, because it was quicker for us to put them on these assets and get them to Kandahar, which was only it was a quicker flight to get us do that. It was a straight 30-minute flight to Kandahar. Whereas if we had to wait for AMEs, it'd be 30 minutes to us and then 30 minutes back. So it's an hour.
And that's where you talk about the golden hour, is that?
Yes. So operations within Afghanistan worked within the golden hour. We were actually slightly outside that, but we're allowed to be because of I was there, and we've been signed off on with our backup plan to be able to move these casualties to and from. So the plan had been using integral assets. Obviously, in mass CADs, it's use all the assets, get everyone out of there. So that's what we were doing. So these helicopters were had as many casualties as we could safely get on there, but get as many people off scene as quickly as possible, because what medics do is we are buying time. There's some people, there's a little bit of a misbelief, misnomer, whatever you'd like to call it, is we save the lives on the ground. What we are doing is we're buying time for surgery, because the only true definitive care is surgery. So we need people to get to surgery. to do that, you need a medic there to buy that time with the skill sets we have to get these people back to surgery. So that's what my goal was, is buying as much time for each individual, treating them as best we could to get them to surgery where they could do definitive care.
And is that where the birds are coming in and then they're going, like, they are going balls to wall to get back
100%, yeah. So every time an asset was coming in, I'd hear over comms, a CFA would come directly to me, ask me who needed to get on the assets. While this is occurring, we also had that CFA working on the other side, and he was letting them know who his worst were, and they were confirming with me if I think that person should go. And I trusted my CFA who was on the other side treating casualties, so who he deemed was a priority, I backed 100%.
Yeah, right.
So when these assets come in, Gary's gone on, I've nominated a couple others, and my CFA had also nominated some people to get on that asset, and took off. By this point, we actually only had one casualty left on scene. So one of the commanders had come to get me to take me to him. He was on the furthest perimeter. As we were moving, the commander actually tackled me to the ground because the rounds had been cooking off a little bit, but it actually started to really cook off, and a few rounds came pretty close. So he tackled me to the ground so I didn't get struck by a round cooking off from the burning wreckage. So once we then moved forward, I got the casualty. The CFA had done everything to this guy. The reason we hadn't put him on asset is he actually was one of the pilots, and he'd actually had a spinal injury, and we couldn't safely put him on the asset without risking further damage. So we were waiting for the final helicopters to land. At the time, we'd actually used up all our stretchers. We had nothing left because we had in the platoons, every CFA carried a folding stretcher, and I carried one too, but we burned through our stretchers. We had nothing left. So one of the commandos actually went and grabbed the door off the crashed helicopter, a couple of them, brought that over, and we put him on because we needed something rigid to keep his spine as straight as possible. And we carried that to the LZ for this final helicopter, and I can honestly tell it's the heaviest stretcher I've carried in my life because the helicopter door plus the casualty was heavy. And that helicopter door is actually the one that's in the war memorial now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it was recovered from the scene by the US guys. It was in the Kandahar medical facility for a period of time, and then it was negotiated between the two governments to get it back to us.
Yeah, and mate, a traumatic scene that you were faced with. Had you, and I thank you for talking me through that, and I know how hard it is. Tim passes. Had you known that Scott had passed at that point, and had you known that Ben had passed at that point, or? So
I didn't know it was Scotty. I just knew one of the commandos was KOA because the platoon commander didn't want to distract me from my job at the time, because I also knew Scotty as well. I knew Scotty pretty well. Me and him used to have some good chats. Ben hadn't passed yet. So when we met that helicopter at the LZ, we loaded in the last casualty, and the platoon commander told me to head back with him to Kandahar to help where I could. He didn't need me on scene anymore. The casualties had been evacuated. We had another team of commandos flying in for support because they had locked down the scene and waiting for backup. So he didn't need me. And that, as the team coming in had a medic with them. So he wanted me to get back and help where I could. So I jumped on that helicopter and we booked it back to Kandahar. When I arrived Kandahar, the American guys took me straight to the Roll 3, the medical facility. And when I got into the resus bays, their version of an emergency bay, it was in full swing. It was obviously every bed was taken up by our guys. I started moving around to each bed because none of the guys carried identification of any kind, and they had no medical notes with them because we were just getting people off scene. So I moved from bed to bed, giving their actual identification so they could be tracked through the system and back to ours, and also told them what treatment had been done on scene and what it actually could, because they didn't know. They just knew they had a heap of casualties. So the doctors understanding what had happened, these casualties actually can impact their decisions. An IED blast versus a high-speed impact, like there are similarities, but there are also other variations. So I did that. As I was moving around, I was actually called over by one of the medical officers, and he told me that one of the commandos had passed away. He took me over to the bed, and I realised it was Ben. I could see they'd done everything they possibly could for him. He just lost too much blood on the scene, and they just couldn't revive him. I thank the medical team for everything they did, because they worked real hard on Ben trying to save him. And I went and told the CFAs who were waiting in the waiting room we lost another, because they weren't allowed into the resusc bay because they weren't actually medical personnel. So I informed them that we lost someone else. They asked to say goodbyes, and the medical team let him in to say some goodbyes, and then I was then called over again by a nurse because one of the commandos had waken up and was disorientated and wanted to know what was going on. I went over, and I won't say his name, but he was obviously agitated and didn't know what was going on. So I informed him what had happened about the crash, and then he asked if we'd lost anyone. And at the time, I was unsure if I should say anything, but I realised that long-term mental health, it would impact him. So I made the decision to tell him what happened. And obviously, he was quite distraught. He knew these guys. Ben was actually his officer. They were tight, but I knew that was the right call. From there, as people started going to surgeries to get definitive care, I then moved out to the recovery area because guys were starting to come out of surgery as well. And once again, I was moving around. A couple of guys were starting to come too, and I just wanted to let them know I was there so they knew someone. And I actually got called over to Gary's bed. The nurse had told me that they relieved the pressure on his brain, but they put him under for surgery, obviously. But then they were trying to, it was called rouse. They were trying to wake him up, and he wasn't responding. So I sat with Gary for a while, talking to him, obviously trying to give him a voice he knew and see if he would rouse to that. But he didn't. I stayed in recovery for a few more hours, and then a commando team came in to relieve me, and it was their job to then stay with the wounded guys, and it was going to travel back with them back through the medical recovery system. So myself and the two CFAs who were there were then taken to a room by the US guys, given some food because we hadn't eaten. It had obviously been going on since the event occurred at 3:39 in the morning, and I think it was probably about 9 o'clock by this time. I actually failed to mention we were actually only on scene for 40 minutes. So from point of impact to all casualties I've seen was 40 minutes.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah, it was fast. We weren't messing around. It was stabilise, triage, and get them out.
And you talk about how you were pulled back from the rounds going off.
Yeah.
How anyone else wasn't injured or from those rounds cooking off, mate, is another miracle.
Yeah.
And because I've heard other podcasts where others have spoken of, rounds zipping past their heads and all, just absolute miracle, mate, that no one else was injured in the attending to these guys.
Yeah, well, like I've mentioned to you before, I don't have a belief in overall,
of course,
faith or anything like that. I don't have anything against it. It's just not who I am. But I guess maybe if someone was watching out for us, they realise we're probably having a hard enough day. Maybe But yeah, as
a medic, mate, that is. You just mentioned a hard day. That is to the extreme of days for a medic. You mentioned off-air that these incidents had happened, like the propeller incident, then Mason, then the Dutch, and then where you were presented with this. In the sense of, like you said, you've had trauma before, but this is trauma on a mass scale. After this, were you thinking, oh, something's not right here? Or because compartmentalising this, very hard to do, mate, with how many guys that had been injured and also 3 guys lost.
Yeah, so post it, obviously, post the day of the event, we rested up for a few hours, and then we got taken back to Taron Kowt with Ben. So the team that came in to escort Ben's body back to Taron Kowt, I returned with them. When I got back to base, my platoon commander obviously found me straight away and told me that we're done. We're going home. We've been deemed ineffective due to losses. Like, obviously I mentioned there was these 15 guys, 10 commandos of the 15. And then we had the ID where we lost 3 others, and then some other stuff had happened. We'd lost too many. So they were bringing in the next call sign being Delta. They were coming in early, and we were going to go home. And we were actually going to escort our platoon, not the entire company, just our platoon, was going to escort the guys home to their families. So I got given, I can't even remember, I feel like it was like 2 or 3 days to like square my shit away and get ready to get on a C-17 and bring the boys home to their families.
You talk about that, and I had Slats on episode 88. He talks about the ramp service for the boys. You're a part of that, aren't you? Like you're and bringing the boys home. That is it a surreal moment as you're you're walking these warriors onto the planes to bring them home to their families. That would have been a surreal moment for you.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I think at the time I was just in operation mode, so it hit me. It definitely hit me. Obviously, post-event, I had to debrief with my medical team because my doctor, my nurse, my sergeant were they're over there as well as a part of the rotation, so I had to debrief with them because it's what you do in any medical team. You have an incident, you always debrief. Just to talk it out. It's not about a blame game, it's about to talk about what happened, what you did. It's just, and also just to check in with the individual who was responding. So I'd obviously done all that, and then it was the ramp ceremony. The ramp ceremonies, I kept it together, I was fine, but when we got back to Australia and we escorted the guys off, we stood there, and obviously then some guys brought them in off the aircraft into the families, and there was a hangar set up, had all the families there, photos of the guys, and all us boys who were on the trip were put into the audience essentially. That was hard. That was that was real hard. It was hard for all of us would I was honestly legitimately trying not to look at the families because I couldn't look at them. It's really hard as a medic to not bring people home. And by that point, there'd been a lot of people not come home who'd been in my orbit. So it's real hard to come to terms with the fact that I, as a young, at that point, I think I was 26-year-old male, came home, but Tim, wife, kids, doesn't come home. So it was real hard, and I was not letting it get to me at those points. I was actively not thinking about it. But then after the ramp ceremony in Australia and the families, we got put on buses and taken back to base, and then met our partners, went home. I had a girlfriend at the time who picked me up, and I got home, pretended like everything was fine, and then I remember I think it was either that night or the night after, I was watching a movie, drinking a scotch, and I must have been trying to be a masochist because I can't remember the name of the movie now, but it's Leonardo DiCaprio, one where he's a spy and a guy gets blown up and he gets dragged onto a helicopter when he's trying to evacuate the scene, and I just fucking lost it. Just lost my shit. And I just kept it to myself. Obviously, yeah. At that time, we came back and I kept it to myself because we had to go to funerals. So we got back and we had Ben's funeral coming up on the 1st of July. So, and I think it was an 8-day gap. We had Ben, then Tim, then Scott. And we our platoon, credit to defence, they should have obviously done, but my platoon commander made sure it happened was the platoon was at every funeral. We were flying to every location. We would get in a location, we're giving accommodation, and we would attend to every funeral to be there for the families. And it became an unwritten thing that we would obviously attend all the funerals. We would get drunk, then attend funerals, and then get even more drunk afterwards. Guys were struggling. There were some guys who were tight with all those boys for a very long time, were really struggling, and it was just... We had to get through it for the families, and it was just hard.
And I'm just pausing for a minute to gather my thoughts. As I said before you started down this path of the 18 months that when you got to 4RAR, 2nd Commando, now, it was everything that you'd hoped for but not hoped for at the same time. That, yes, you want to do your job, but the loss that you had with and the trauma that you dealt with in that 18 months of being attached to 4RAR, mate, just, I'm lost for words. I don't know how you were still standing, mate. Like, I really don't.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Actually, a few people said that to me over the years. And I used to have, and we'll get into, like, mental health treatment later, but, like, I used to just say, yeah, but it is what it is. It was my job, and I was just doing my thing. Looking back retrospectively, I was just compensating to the best of my ability and relying on compartmentalisation. Also not having, at those times, not having a wife and kids and stuff like that, I think in some ways allowed me to just wallow, but get through it, like not having to spread my mental load across other individuals.
Yeah.
Like, being a parent can be hard sometimes, but I wasn't fighting those battles. I was just having to be at work, do the best I could at work, and then I just come home. I've always been pretty on top of my consumption of alcohol. I can drink, but I was always pretty strict on myself. Like, I only drink on a weekend because I know alcoholism in the military is a slippery slope. So I would just write myself off every weekend. I'd just gym my ass off through the week, work, come home, play video games, watch TV, whatever it was. I had split with my partner not long after Afghan because I was not in the right headspace.
Understandable.
Yeah, and look, I felt bad in looking back retrospectively, not because I definitely didn't do anything negative towards it. It wasn't verbal or abusive or anything like that, but I just was not the partner I should have been, and I just wasn't there. So it was everything was going into work to put on the normal, you're rock solid at work, and then at home I was just getting by.
And
then write myself off on a weekend.
And how's your family? Have they noticed a change in you?
So post the funerals, so shit happened at the funerals too. So at actually Tim's funeral, had actually received a call from Schema saying, "Congratulations, we're promoting you to sergeant." I'm like, okay, cool. I said, "Look, I'm at a funeral. Can we talk about this later?" I wasn't at the funeral; it was just post the funeral, going to the wake. And she's like, "I need to talk to you now." I won't say an name, but she was a hard ass. I knew her from back in my CSB days. And I said, "Okay, I can quickly talk." And she's like, "Yep, we're going to promote you to sergeant." I'm like, "Cool. Am I going to the Army School of Health like I want?" Because my goal had always been go to the command and then go back to school and give back to the new medics, teach them what I wish I'd been taught. And she's like, nah, no positions in school, you're going to Darwin. I'm like, Darwin's not even on anywhere I want to go. I've done my time in Darwin, I don't want to go back. And she's like, "Well, if you don't accept it, I'll fuck your career," and fucking literally at a funeral for one of the boys who died in my care, and my career is now being threatened. So I luckily had enough wherewithal to just take a breath and say, "Okay, well, I need to talk to my partner about this." And she's like, "Okay, yep, I'll call you back tomorrow." I'm like, "Okay." So I left. We were in the lines at the time. Went and found my RSM and said, "Look, this is what's just happened." He's like, "Mate, do not take her call. Do not even acknowledge anything. We will take care of this." And when I returned to work after the funerals, I had a meeting with the CO, told him what had happened, what my plan was. And he's like, "Yeah, mate, I'll make a call." And then I got told, "Yep, she's never to engage with you again. We're keeping you for 12 more months, and then we'll get you down to the school like you want to do." I'm like, "Thank you." But it was pretty rough to have my career threatened.
Of course.
Obviously, I've just gone through this time and then have my career threatened. But anyway. And I moved off your question a little bit. But yeah, so at this time, I was just getting by with my mental health. And the big thing that kicked my ass back into gear was, so post the funerals, I took all the leave I had in my book pretty much, which is like a month and a bit. Took it off, went and spent time with families, just drinking a lot. I was pretty volatile. But I think everyone was just accepting of. No one said anything. My family's a bit buttoned up in the sense that we don't talk about that stuff. And then I came back to work, and I was just kind of floating around. Not a lot was going on. Obviously, the platoon was still trying to sort itself out. Like, we're post-deployment, so we're refitting and reorganising everything. And my sergeant pulled me in, the guy I've mentioned a couple of times, and he's like, yep, here's your report. Like, it's an outstanding yearly report, like kicking goals, all that sort of stuff. And then he goes, all right, so now that's done. He goes, we're going to have a proper conversation. He goes, I've got to send you on your promotion, your subject for your sergeant. So it's your course-specific promotion course. He goes, but, mate, he goes, you need to pull your foot out, get yourself back in gear. He goes, I get it. He goes, but you're here, but you're not. I can tell. He goes, I need you to be back to who you were and be operating the way you were. He goes, I think a course back in regular army will be great for you. He goes, you got to wear your uniform properly, put your boots on. Yes, sir. No, sir. He goes, I think that'll really help you get yourself back on track. And he goes, just take this course as what it is. He goes, it's not a hard course. Take it as courses to get yourself right. And that resonated with me. I realised I was obviously just needed to kind of do that. So it didn't fix me, but it kind of reorientated me a bit, and I was very appreciative of him doing that for me. Did the course, came back, went on Christmas leave, and then the next year we rolled into my extension year, which was called TAG East, or Domestic Counterterrorism Operations.
So there's and I'll say this for the civilian listener, so there's TAG West, which is the SAS. They take care of the west coast, and there's TAG East on the east coast. So, and that is what Damo is talking about, where he was attached to TAG East. So, and it's basically the counter-terrorism of the whole of the east coast of Australia. So that is what he means by that. And so you're there, mate, on that, which I know I've had a lot of guys on that have said tag is tag. It is not. It's not a year of Damo, you can relax. You can you can tools down, mate. Just put your feet up on the desk for the next year. It is almost, from what I've been told, it is almost as kinetic as being on deployment.
Yeah, it is, and obviously I can't go into specifics about a lot of the stuff, but yeah, you're on. You live, so it's actually worse in operations in some ways, because your phone is glued to your hand at all times, never on silent, always on loud. Doesn't matter rain, sun or shine, if it rings, you go. I literally was at a date in a movie theatre and my phone got called and I had to step out and go to work. And that's just how it goes. So I rolled into that, and it was actually early in that year of tag, I was just kicking around with a couple of guys, and I don't know why, I was reflecting, and I realised I'd been going through the motions. So by that point, it had been 7 months since the incident, and I hadn't mentioned this, but so post-incident, obviously I was, like all of us, were mandated to go see our psychs to be assessed, and then me and a number of people who were at the incident were essentially flagged for regular checkups. And so I've been doing all that. Once again, though, just keeping it to myself, not thinking about it. But it was probably about, I don't know, it was probably March, April-ish, and I had realised that I'd just been going through the motions. At work, doing my job, making sure I'm doing the right thing. Then I'd just be gymming and going home, and that was it. And I realised I was kind of heading down a bad mental health path. And look, I know a number of guys have spoken about this on podcasts, on yours and others, that defence is better at mental health these days, but if you raise that flag, you put a target on you. You are not promotable, you are not deployable. So I wasn't going to do that, but I realised because I was due to promote to sergeant at the end of that year, so I wasn't going to raise that red flag. So I just realised I need to kind of sort my shit out. So I dialed back my drinking a little bit, started taking a more positive look at things. And then, I did that year. And that's actually, while I was on tag, is when I got awarded my DSM for the incident.
So, and I'll get you to talk DSM, mate. So for the civilian listener, what is that? And it's, I know what it is. It's a medal. Can you talk to the civilian listener of what it is?
Yeah, so it's what's called the Distinguished Service Medal. So it's a medal given for wartime service, for something in wartime service, and they can be given out for a variety of reasons. It's not medic specific. For mine, it was given out for obviously distinguished service display during the event of the helicopter crash. So it's rarely given out to medics. There's only, I think off the top of my head, there's only 3 medics with it who've ever been awarded it. But it when I was given it, it came with a mixed bag of emotions. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah,
now?
please. Yeah.
So when I was given it, I hadn't expected to be given anything. It hadn't even occurred to me, honestly. When I received the letter, I didn't even know anything was coming. And I was pretty torn about it, because the way I kind of viewed it is I was just doing my job. It was, look, I've always said I'm nothing special. I've got the same training as everybody else. I was just the guy there during those incidents. So I never viewed what I did as special or I'm unique or any of that. I was the guy that had people get hurt, and I did my very best to try and get them home to their families.
You're one of the most humble blokes I know. Like, yeah, it's that, and for you to say that, I know that, as I say, mate, I've known you for a while, and it is like, you are humble to say that, yeah, it's a job well done, mate. Like, you've done a good job.
Yeah, and look, I don't know, for me, and I'll finish talking about the DSM in a moment, but for me, I always wanted to join the Army, and the thing I always wanted to do was serve on operations with Special Forces, supporting those guys. And I got that. Like, I got it. So, and like you mentioned earlier, it was the old monkey paw. It was a dream come true that I got to deploy with a Special Forces group on operations supporting them. The flip side of that was it came with was guys died. So when I received the medal, it came with a mixed bag of feelings, because like I was just there trying to do what I could for the guys, and I carried hurt that guys didn't come home, and I didn't blame myself, but I did and I didn't. I didn't do anything wrong. I did the best I could for them, but it still hurts. Like I mentioned earlier, to be a 20-year-old guy coming home and a dad's not. So it's hard to reconcile that. And it's taken me a long time too. And so when I got the medal, it's a little bit ironic. The medal is actually a white ribbon with red stripes on it. And when I first kind of saw the medal, it reminded me a little bit of like we used to have in medical corps, these white uniforms. There's a little bit of like blood running down. And it was just an unhealthy way to view the medal, I know. But it's just kind of a bit how... It took me a long time to kind of... Initially, I viewed the medal as like a reminder of the guys that didn't come home. But then over time, and once I started getting some help and stuff, I realised that it was a recognition of not a recognition of the guys that did come home, as opposed to those that didn't.
And the guys and the lives that were saved that day, you know. And so do you have because that's a very distinguished award, do you have to go to Government House to accept it, or is it just...
Yeah, so I went and I met the New South Wales Governor she presented to me at the time, had my family come, my then partner came, it was a great day. It was also very surreal, because I was still in the unit, I was still going through the motions, and it's just, at that point, I was actually the only medic to have received the medal. So, yeah. Yeah. So I'd gotten the medal at Government House. It was a big affair and stuff. And then at the time, I was actually training for my new job. So I had to fly back from Brisbane, and I'll talk about the job I was going to a little bit later, but I had to fly back from that to get this medal to then obviously come back again. And like I said, I never hated getting it, but it just came with complex feelings. And for a while, I would wear it, but I wouldn't acknowledge it, just because it was just, like I said, it is how I viewed it at the time.
Of course. And you mentioned that the help that you've got since. Have you changed your view of it now, like after getting that help that you needed and process, and years gone by now? Do you look at it different now, or is it still mixed feelings?
It's a good question. Since getting help, my perspective on a number of things has changed. My guilt around the Dutch incident and Tim have changed to be more appropriate to what they actually are. For the medal, I'm proud to receive a medal of such high caliber as a medic, and yeah, I think that's probably where I've landed. It's like I'm proud I've received this medal. I don't run around screaming it that I've got this medal and make it a big deal to people. I rarely mention it, honestly. Mainly, it only ever comes up in a conversation when I'm wearing my medals and someone asks what it is. But I'm at a comfortable place with that.
And that's I think it's a good place to be, and it's highlighting exactly what you've said. And you know, I'll talk about it now because it's a great segue, and then we'll go into where you post into after this. You mentioned mental health, and you mentioned putting your hand up and getting the help that you needed, and now where you're at was because back then, and even I'd say in the up to maybe 5 years ago, putting your hand up for mental health was deemed, there was a stigma around it that real men don't speak, and I know myself in the journey I've gone through and putting my hand up, because 11 years ago I was there. I wanted to end my life, and it's hard, isn't it, mate, to actually admit that you've got, it's got too much and you actually need to put your hand up. And especially being in the military, it is a hard thing to do.
Yeah, look, and we can probably talk about the mental health journey a little bit later because it comes later in my career. But at the time, definitely, and once you put your hand up, and people would probably, I'm sure if you ask certain people, certain rank, they're like, nah, that wouldn't happen. But if you put your hand up, they don't, the stigmas was better even by that point, but it stops promotion and it stops deployments. And if you were geared, but for me, I was geared operationally, I wanted to keep doing my job. I wanted to keep being operational. That meant I had to just deal with this shit. Just fucking deal with it, mate. I just keep pushing forward because that's what you got to do. And I actually used the guys who died in motivation for that in some ways, that they didn't get to come home. I'm home. I can do better. So I would, and looking back, probably not the most mentally healthy way to deal with things, but I instead of wallowing over the guys who passed away, I use them as driving force, that these were elite soldiers who didn't come home. I can get my fat ass up and run a bit further and a bit faster. I can make sure I pass this fitness test better. I can make sure I'm doing my job at the peak of I'm doing it. And that drove me for a very long time, that these boys can't be here. The least I can do is be the best soldier I can be.
And using a post-traumatic incident as growth and moving forward, which you did, and we'll keep going through your career and then talk about that mental health piece towards the end. And so all that's happened, mate, and then in 2012 you actually do post to the School of Health, and is this now where you actually get the opportunity to give back?
Yeah, man, I actually got a great role when I went to the school. So at the time we were still full-on Afghan. So a team was growing that called the Combat Health Training Team. So it was a team of 4 of us who were deemed SMEs at the time, and they were all experienced guys at the core team, and we were people posted to the school, but then Div funded us to move to the location of deploying forces, and then we would get experienced medical help personnel in the location and then run medical training. So I literally posted in and then went straight up to Townsville to deploy 3RAR, and I spent months in Townsville running. So we would run. There was 2 types of training we ran. One was for every man, CEO down to the private. No one was exempt. It was at the time the training was called CBC, so Care of the Battle Casualty. It was based off the American TCCC, so Tactical Combat Casualty Care. So everyone CO down had to learn how to apply a combat application tourniquet, put a nasopharyngeal airway in, use quick clot, and use compound or compressed dressings to stop bleeds. Everyone, doesn't matter who you were. It could be a QE, could be a shooter, didn't matter. So everyone had to do it. It was a big push by defence because by that point we'd lost a lot of people, and they realised that if we weren't training these people to do this stuff, like people's heads would roll up higher. So that everyone was getting, that's the baseline. And then we would run complex medical training for medics, CFAs, nurses and doctors of varying scenarios. So the treatment teams would be put through, obviously have being overrun with casualties. We'd have the medics doing we'd start them off one-on-one treating, and then we'd throw a few casualties at them. Then more and more, and we build to a mass cas. All the people deploying, all the combat units deploying, and all the support units would go through that training. So we did that for all the different deployments. So I literally went up to Townsville. I'd come home for a few months, and then I'd fly to I think it was Brisbane next, and we did those boys and girls going and stuff. So that was a job. It was a wicked job. Really enjoyed it. I was single when I went down to the school, so I was able to not be tied down. So that was great. When I was doing it, though, in between, I'd actually kind of brokered a deal with the sergeants running the actual med courses that I would come and do med kit lessons. So teaching a baby medic how to pack a med kit, because I learned some hard lessons over the years about the way to do it and the way not to. And you think that would be something that'd be taught during their training? They're not. It's kind of because everyone you could put 100 medics in a room and we wouldn't agree on that stuff. So I would just go give them my forethoughts on it and ideas and concepts, and then let them do whatever they want to. But it's just about knowledge. Knowledge is power. Then it evolved from that to we would actually, in their final phase of their med training, we started working with the sergeants running those courses to run medical scenarios for them. So we would run complex medical scenarios. We'd teach them about, like I spoke about earlier, CAS-Reg cell and how it impacts an area of operation, not just Afghanistan, any. Then teach them about how you integrate. We'd give them some life skills, or as the olds and bolds used to call it, jungle hot tips. Yeah. For those old enough to even remember that sort of a saying, I used to hear it as a private all the time. But it was essentially just trying to help, give them the best foot forward. And we didn't just make it for Army, we did it for across the services. I had experience with Navy, I had a little experience with Air Force, so we tried to contextualise it for each of them. And I really enjoyed that part. Not a part of my actual job. That was me reaching out, and the sergeant I spoke about earlier at 2 Commando then came along later and became my WO at the school after another WO. Both of them were great. And they both supported us doing this because they both acknowledged this is us trying to give back to the new baby medics coming out and give them the best way to set them up for success. So I really enjoyed that. And I did that I was originally at the school for 3 years. My first year there, I noticed a gap in training. So we're doing this training, but we weren't giving people product, as in literature, that they could then refer to. So I actually made an aid memoir, which is just a go-to flip book. Once again, I come from a very high-tempo place, and coming to the school, which is busy, but not special forces busy. So I found I had time to do things. So in between running these big training things, I started to create this a memoir. And it was out of no order, no drive for anything, just wanted to make this so I could then give it to the AFA, the poor truckie who got 1 or 2 days of medical training, then goes overseas and doesn't get to practice it. He can go, shit, how do I do this? And look back through this book and, oh, that's how I do it. Okay, cool. Anyway, I made that. And then all of a sudden I got presented the next year the CF's Marks Award. So it's a medical award given to those who are trying to drive or do something positive for medical corps. And they presented me for the creation of that, which was unexpected. Once again, didn't do this for anything. I just wanted to try and make things better for the man and the guy and the girl on ground. Like the people who we belt feed training to, but then they don't get any follow-up training. I wanted to make sure they felt comfortable if they ever had to put a tourniquet on someone, they knew how to do it. And they actually still use that A memoir now. They've changed the name because now our military is fully adopted TCCC in line with the US and the Brits. Actually, no, Brits, but they still use it. They just, because it's all the same practices, they just change the name of the title page. But anyway, I got presented that, and I actually met the Governor General for that. So, because she was the honorary rep for the Corps at the time. So that was in my second year at the school. And then in my third year, I got selected to go instruct in Mongolia with the UN.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so 4 people in the military got selected. My boss put me forward, didn't even know about it, just put me forward for it. He was a good major, really good guy.
Yeah.
He was an ex-SO commander as well. He'd come down to the school, really good guy. Put me forward for it, going, I think you'd be great for this. Don't expect anything of it. I'm like, sure, sounds great. And I was the only OR who got selected, 3 officers, 2 infantry, 1 artillery got selected. We went over and worked with 30 other countries and training the Mongolian forces on their MRE to go to the South Sudan. Yeah, so I linked in with my US and Brit counterparts. One of them was like a CFA equivalent, one of them was a medic, and we ran medical training for them. And it gives you a very broad, such a good perspective because they didn't have combat application tourniquets. They weren't given anything like that. So having to teach them how to do improvised tourniquets, teaching them how to pack a wound when you don't have compressed dressings, all of that stuff. So it was very bush medicine orientated in the sense of like, they at the very beginning, look, these people don't have a lot of staff, so you need to make sure you're not teaching things they'll never get to use. Yeah. Okay. So we had to really contextualize it to them to the point where when we were running med scenarios, I got given like 4 blank rounds to fire to initiate a contact. The participants didn't have any. So we'd throw a smoke grenade, fire a couple of rounds to initiate the scenario, so they would then start treating people with it. But look, it was brilliant. Real, like... God, I can't
out of the box thinking and
and it was just great working with all these other forces, like big representations from the US, the Marine, so US Army, the Marines, the UK Marines, the Japanese Special Forces. I can't even think of half the countries. Honestly, we had Pakistan and India there. It was not in the same buildings, obviously. But yeah, it was because it's UN. So it was UN led. So it was really, really fun trip. I think that ran for 2 months. Yeah, right. So I did that, and that was in my third year. I came back, and then I actually got given the opportunity to go to Kokoda. So the way that played out was it wasn't defence sponsors or anything, so I'm not that lucky to get that many defence. I know I've gotten a few good things, but no, this was through Mates for Mates. So Ray Palmer, Scott Palmer's father, had actually asked me to come on the trip. The way he funded that through a charity, but the way the rest of the participants were selected for the trip was widows or family of deceased members or soldiers with PTSD were offered an opportunity to go walk the Kokoda. And the way they funded it is they approached a big insurance organisation called IAA, and they sponsored the positions, so they gave half the sponsored positions to their own personnel in IAA, and the other half were given to veterans with mental health issues or family members of the fallen. So it was amazing. But Ray had actually got extra money through a sponsorship, and he invited me because he wanted me to come along. We could spend a bit of time together. Obviously, like talking about Scotty. And actually, during the trek, it was actually Scotty's birthday. Oh. So that night we propped up. We propped up, had a few drinks, and just talked about Scotty. It was amazing. Ray's a great human being. So anyway, when I got on the ship, I had no idea, because I was like secondarily invited. I had no idea. I just assumed it was a bunch of family and veterans. I didn't know there was going to be all these insurers or anything like that. Everyone got all these lead-up programs. I just knew I was going to walk the Kokoda. It's 100 Ks, and I was doing it in 7 days. So I just started throwing a pack on and going for stomps up hills to train myself, like literally. Anyway, we arrived, and I found out about the insurance and the sponsorship. Anyway, we did the Kokoda. It was brilliant. Ray was on there with his other son and his niece, and there was some other family members have fallen. There's some soldiers who were from Inso Command and some who were from Big Army who were all like struggling with PTSD. It was a really, really great walk. We got to near the end, and then Ray's partner Pam flew in with the RSL, and they presented people shirts with all the guys' names of the fallen. And we did a big tribute up there for everyone. And I actually, during the trek, met my wife. So she was one of the people working for the insurance company. We met. There was a couple of other girls who she was friends with on the trek, and just got to chatting, and just like the groups kind of separated into, because some people were faster, slower, and then they're very slow. So I kind of just floated between the faster and the medium group, and just connected, chatting, became friends. And then returned to Australia, kept engaged with my wife Jess, and then a few months later we started dating. So,
and I'm going to talk about Jess and the kids a little bit further down the podcast, because I want to highlight just how important Jess and the kids have been for you, and so we'll get to that in a little bit. But I want a bit of a left of field one here, and I've just been like thinking about it. With Afghanistan, mate, and Iraq, and the medical advances that happened on the ground, were they has it advanced because it's terrible to say, because of war? The medical advances that you guys from the ground, like, has that been instrumental in moving the medical profession forward?
100%. Like I used to say this all the time. Pre-Afghanistan, our medical training was, I wouldn't say subpar, but it was barely par. Let's just put it that way. We got trained well. Anatomy and physiology, great. But trauma training was very average, because we weren't in a war conflict. And even, like, Solomon's wasn't producing casualties. Timor wasn't producing casualties. Iraq wasn't producing casualties for Australia. Not many. So we really didn't have to, we could kind of, there was some people, it wasn't from the ground level wanted to advance, and even the mid-level wanted to advance, but there's some people high up who were hesitant to give medical personnel skills, because at the time, and it's changed now, but medics were not registered as anything. We were qualified through the military training system, and under Commonwealth law, qualified to do our jobs. We were not registered as under the medical system as a doctor, a nurse, or anything. The doctors held the liability of medics. So anything a medic did, the doctor who signed off on them having their medications and their skill sets fell on that doctor.
Wow, that's a huge responsibility.
It was, and obviously there were some doctors who were quite uncomfortable with it, and hence it drove hesitancy. What occurred, though, was Afghanistan forced the hand of people that they couldn't be hesitant, because it was either be hesitant and people died, and then you're held accountable for not giving gold standard treatment, or you essentially let people do what we were trained to do and like what we were qualified and taught to do, but it carried a risk. So Afghanistan really propelled that forward, as well as bringing in new equipment like Quick Clot, the emergency bandage,
Afghan bandage.
All of that stuff rolled in because of that. My biggest fear, and it also opened up the scope of practice for like those in special forces. We were able to do tracheostomies, cricothyroidotomies. We were able to do needle decompressions, which we'd always been able to do, but we could. It expanded us to do things outside our scope, only in the settings that we were authorised to do them. So, it grew that skill set, not just for SOCOM, for Big Army as well. They were essentially not let off the leash, because that sounds like we're cowboys. It was, we were given the ability to use our full scope of practice, and that continued forward. When Afghanistan started winding down, my biggest fear as a clinician and a trainer was that they would put the safety training was back on, and not let people practice all the skill sets. And in some ways it did happen, but in most ways we're actually still in a good place. That's only because the senior leadership now understands that, like, if you go backwards, you open yourself up to fail. So we have very good medical and other non-medical leadership who understands the importance of skill sets in medical, and we have very all the woe ones now who help drive some of this stuff are all Afghan guys and girls. So they understand the importance of this stuff. So I hope it doesn't go backwards. Obviously, I'm out of the system now. I hope it doesn't go backwards. But, it very much did drive things forward.
For the better, yeah.
Yeah, much, definitely.
And as you've just said, medical skills, if you don't, it's like any skill, if you don't use it, you lose it. Like, you've got to maintain those standards those high standards to stay effective. Yeah. And if you don't,
well, the good thing is we have we can really lean on the Yanks for things and the Brits and things like the TCCC. We can point to that. There's a committee run by high level medical officers who have huge amounts of experience in the US feeding that committee. And we actually have a seat on that now as Australia.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and that is fed by the most up to date stuff. So you can't argue with it. So it's kind of one of those things. The door got opened, and now everyone who has a horse in the race is keeping their foot in that door to make sure we can keep rolling forward, and we don't go backwards because. Not that I'm aware of, but there was no one ever died from that. I'm aware of from not being given the opportunity to do what they could do. But some of the things I was taught early in my career were by people who are medical professionals who are just risk averse. That wouldn't have survived first contact. So there is a very big difference between barracks medicine and combat medicine, and also people need to understand that. There are some cowboys out there who think everything's combat. It's no, you need to know when to wield the cool, sexy things, and when it's okay to actually just do the non-sexy.
Well, we're sitting here in your office, and there's a big sign up with Voodoo Medics, mate. There's a reason you guys are the Voodoo Medic guys. Because, as you said, key point you touch on. There's a time and a place. Combat to, as you said, barracks, being that learning it in a training environment, to actually putting it into practice in combat.
Yeah, and it's always one of those things that used to irk me a little bit, because medics in the SO Command, we're obviously called kilos in SO Command, we're always kind of referred to by some people as cowboys, and not at all. We're actually quite rigid in what we do and how we do it. It's just we're given a lot more leash, so people view that as being a cowboy. It's not at all. A lot of the time it's driven by people who don't have that opportunity.
Of course.
So they need to poo-poo it a little bit. But trust, I was referred to, I met every single posting I've ever been on a number of occasions, people expected me coming in to be arrogant and a cowboy. Literally on a number of them come in and they met me and they're like, oh. And they will always say, oh, I totally thought you were going to be way more arrogant than you are. Or thought you were going to become no, dude, we're not. That's not how we are. That's not who we are. We're if anything, the microscope is on us a lot. So
and I think, too, it shows that, at the end of the day, mate, you guys are there to treat the casualty and protect and save lives.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's not acting on being a cowboy. It is purely and simply, what is your core role, mate? It is to treat people, and as you said, to get them back to surgeons to save people's lives.
Yeah, I think it just comes part and parcel.
Of course.
I mean, I know even with SOCOM guys, like the shooters themselves, they get referred to a little bit like that sometimes, and they're not at all. They're actually very serious and very professional.
Of course, yeah, and it's just outside eyes looking in, mate.
Yeah.
Always,
It's people who don't understand,
and they're not under the tent. They're not seeing what's going on. It's just, oh, what are they doing? Oh, yeah, okay, I'm not involved in that, so I'll assume because and assumption is it can kill things very quickly. So So you're at the school, and then I just wanted to bring that in because it was really, I thought, this is a really great time to bring in the advances that Afghanistan, brought into that, and like the capabilities going forward, which is only going to benefit people with, well, when, I hate to say it, the next war happens, and there will be another war. Like you've got to look around the world now ahead of what's happening, and you might get the old call again,
maybe.
Damo, hey mate, dust off your medical kit, mate. Let's go. Like, I think your wife might have a bit.
I think so. But no, and look, it was a good segue because that was part of the role I did at the school was in the CHTT, the team. We would actually, that's why we brought in, so the way we would do is when we'd fly on locations, people who'd been on the previous rotation would be instructors.
Right.
To teach the people going. So it was the most up-to-date knowledge we could give them. Because that was actually based off a SOCOM model. So SOCOM, the whole time was there. So the guys who trained me to go on my deployment are the guys who just come back from deployment.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So they led the medical training to make sure I was getting the most up-to-date information and Big Army adopted that model too because you can't argue it's the most current and up-to-date information you can actually get. So, but that was like I did that for 3, and then I'd met my wife, and I'd always planned to go back to SOCOM, and I'd been offered to go back to 2 Commando in my 3rd, but I wanted to go to SOA because I wanted to expand my profile, understand that side of the fence because the Special Operation Engineers medicine side is heavily based in CBRNE, and that's different to what 2 Commando focused on.
Right.
So I wanted to go back into the command, but into a different area, so I could actually gain that knowledge and expand my own profile.
Yeah, right.
So I had to stay for a 4th year at the school to line up for that.
Right.
So my wife, then girlfriend, came down for a year, and then we both came back to Sydney.
So you come back to Sydney, and then you do post in there into SOA. Mm-hmm. How long are you in and attached with SOA for?
So initially, prior to my time at school, Army postings were 2 years for support staff. Going into school, they actually changed the model to 3 years just because they kind of realised a couple of different things. Cost saving for one, but also they realised people posting, you spend the first year learning your job, and then normally when you're leaving, the last 6 months you're handing over, so they're getting 6 months out of someone, really, effectively. So they went, well, let's make it 3 years, and then at least get first year learn, second year implementation improve, and then third year, half a year's doing that, half a year's marching out, handing over.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, so that meant all postings from that point forward were 3 years minimum normally. So I went into SOA on a 3-year posting as the sergeant. I'd been a sergeant for 4 years by that point. And I was put straight on to the treatment. So they called us. Sorry.
No, you're right. You're right.
Sorry, you're recording? Yeah. Yeah. So I got put on to the medical element attached to the domestic counterterrorism group. So there's the engineers have an attachment to them, and then there's a medical element attached to those engineers who specialise in CBRNE. And a part of that team, we have the guys and girls who are embedded, and then we had the SORT, so the Special Operations Resus team. So they are the doctor, nurse, sergeant, medics who are there to provide deployable, either overseas or domestically, resus capability for special forces. So 2 Commando, SOA and Perth, which SASR, all have them. So I was the sergeant, the lead sergeant, and the senior sergeant. So I was the senior sergeant in the medical platoon. So there's 2 sergeants, one for overseas, one for domestic. And then we had a series of medics under us, and then we had a warrior med who sit above us, and then doctors and nurses as well. And we're allocated to each of those, and then we could provide med support. So I was the sergeant because I had experience with that. It actually worked out really well because when I arrived, the guys who were on DCT for the commandos was Alpha Company. So I actually walked into the very first briefing, I knew half the room. So it actually makes things a lot easier because when you're a support staff, so in my case, medical support staff, the biggest hurdle can be getting over the who are you and like what do you know, and they just need to know they can trust your decisions. So walking into the room and everyone knows me and knows my experience in the unit made things very, very easy for us in the sense of Damo, we know we can trust what you're saying and you know what you're talking about. Like, all right, give us the medical plan. They give me the operational plan and then we make the medical plan fit within that. So that was my role. There was a lot more to it. I can't talk about, but that was the crux of that role. So I did that for my first year. Second year we moved to overseas operational support, and then third year back onto DCT. And that was great. Like I learned a lot of the different side of medicine for there. I also helped myself and a number of others help bring in some new processes and stuff. And I actually got the chance to go work with the Canadian Special Forces and their medical teams and how they do some things, and essentially so we could learn to cross-level some of our training, like how do you do that, how do we do that, and work together as a coalition force, essentially. And that was great. So I did that, though. That happened in my third year, and it was just, I think it was about I was over there for 2 months, and it was very close to my first child being born. I got back. So I definitely made sure I was back in time for it, but there was not a lot of time in between.
And so a busy time on that side of the fence of SOA. And then in 2018, mate, you actually posted to headquarters 17th, is it?
17 Brigade.
Yeah, 17 Brigade.
Yeah.
What was, and this is where you were, so from 2018 to 2022 as the brigade health planner and ops. This is where you're a warrant officer, is that right?
Yes, correct. I promoted to warrant officer.
You promoted to warrant officer, and you were a part of, so for bushfire assist, talk me through, like the bushfires were happening at this point. What was your role here? What were you doing?
So I asked for that job because it was Sydney-based, and we just had our first child, and obviously my wife had been quite supportive of me wanting to do stuff for Special Forces. I've been away a lot, so I had actually asked for that job, and that way she could have her support, stay with her support network here in Sydney. And the Army was great about that. They were super accommodating to work with me on that, so I took that promotion. And that's actually when I'll talk about the job in a minute, but that's actually the first time I saw proper mental health treatment, not within the system, through Open Arms, because when we'd had our first child, my daughter Eve, and some cracks had started to appear with me how I regulated my emotions. Once again, I never laid a hand on my child or anything like that, but literally one of the turning points was by then she was moving around, spilt a cup of milk, and I just dropped my bundle, lost my shit over a cup of milk. And my wife even said to me at times, she's like, it's a cup of milk. And I'm just like, I just lost my shit. So I realised I needed some help. So I wasn't willing to risk promotion or operations, so I sought mental health through Open Arms. And that went on. I got help for about 6 months. Open Arms is a great source, but the only problem with Open Arms is they can provide limited care sometimes, and it's only for a short period of time. So it was more for me. It kind of got me to a better place, but it was more of a top up than a treatment, I would say. But anyway, so that was ongoing, and I kept that on the down low at the time. But for the role itself, it was because 17 Brigade is the headquarters that sits over top of all the support units through Army. So the cooks, the truckies, the pet ops, the medics, a lot of those units all fall under 17 Brigade because all those capabilities are pulled together and then loaned out to units as needed. So in that role, I was part of the health team, and we had a colonel who's a senior health officer, and then we had a team of like a couple officers, a couple of warrants, and we provided him information. We did health planning. It was a good job, good bunch of teams, and it actually gave me a really good perspective on high level management of assets. So I'd obviously come from front line, literally front line, as far forward as you can be, and then I skipped all the way up to top line where you have to have the overarching operational picture, planning, all these things. So it was a very good contrast for me to understand that. And it was one of those jobs you could either coast by or you could lean in and learn. And I leaned in and learned because I wanted to understand complex operational planning at a higher level. During that time, COVID happened and bushfires happened. Bushfires, when that occurred, I mean, I was at home literally on leave like everyone was, and I got pulled in, and they pulled in all the warrants from a lot of the cells and said, look, you're now under an OPSWO helping run operations. And look, it wasn't, for me, it was just like we were creating task orders, we were relaying orders down to units, we were trying to deconflict and help people as best we could, move people around the battle space. Like, it wasn't complex, it was busy, but like it was a lot harder for the people on the ground. It was one of those jobs where when that happened, then COVID happened, I'm like, it's one of those times where at headquarters I could see how difficult it was moving things around, but you could also, I knew as someone who's been on the ground for a lot of things, like, fuck, these people will be really struggling and we need to try and give them the support they need. And the hierarchy was all about giving them the support they needed, but it can be hard. It also gives you the good perspective. Everyone thinks their shit's the most important, and then you've got to figure out whose is the most important. So,
it was a crazy time, especially with it. Literally went, like, for us, it went fires, floods, COVID, fires, floods, COVID, and it was just, it was a weird time. Like, you know, you only think back, and like I was talking to someone about it the other day where they're like, COVID was 4 years ago. Like, what? Like, where did that time go? Like, it's just like, and we're 4 years post, like, and it's like, wow, like, where did that go? Like,
yes, we actually had my son in COVID, so he wasn't a COVID baby, he was a planned baby. We had him, like, so it all happened, like, so 2020 we had him. So it was just like, so it worked out well because for me, in the regards that because of COVID, I was at headquarters, we just worked from home. I was remote, so it meant I was actually home when my son was born, and like was able to support my wife. So it actually was good and a lot of
blessing. And
for me, well, because I've been when my daughter was born, I was actually away a lot because I was still her first year when I was in Seoul. Still, I was away for a good chunk of that year, so. It was a better, like, obviously it was very hard for a lot of people, and not blind to that, but for me, in my career at that time, actually meant I could be around for my second born, so.
And I think I'll segue this now in the sense of, like, we'll move forward shortly in the next part of your career.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great segue and ties in really well. How... You mentioned that this is where you actually put your hand up to open arms, and this is where you really start to look into your mental health a bit more. And understandably, I can understand why, Damo, with what's happened in all those years gone by. How important has the support of Jess been in that post coming through that tough time and becoming a father? How has that changed your perspective of life?
Huge. So Jess has been amazing. She's a way better parent than I am. I say that to everybody. She's an awesome parent. She's also an awesome partner. She's always supported me, always had my back. Like, I can't understate how having her as a supportive partner she hasn't ever served, so there's things she struggles to understand. And initially, when I was dealing with a lot of problems, like, I would be frustrated because she didn't understand, and then I kind of, why something came to the understanding, like, why would she and how could she? So once I kind of wrapped my head around that, it's more about she wanted to understand, but it's like it's context. But having someone there who just had my back, who, whenever I needed help, would back me, like, just understands. Even now, I still have hard times, and she understands, and she's supportive, like... But the reason she is because she knows I'm working on it. Like, if I wasn't working on it, I think she would be like, you need to either sort yourself or we're done, and rightly so, which happens with a lot of people, guys and girls. I've known a lot of friends whose relationships fall apart because they're not willing to work on it and their partner can't deal with that. And I knew I did not want to lose her or my kids. My kids are a huge factor because I realised... And we'll get to that a little bit later about, like, towards the end of my career, but I realised Army was getting the best version of me and my family was getting what was left over. So I was putting 110% into work, Army, doing the best job I could, no matter the job. And then I come home and then what was left in the tank is what they got. And I realised I wanted my kids to have the best dad version they could get. I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect as a dad. I beat myself up sometimes over some things. But I realise I've still got I've got 3 now, all under, I got an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I want them to get their best version of dad. He won't be perfect, but I want them to get that best version. So therapy, I only really engaged with it undercover, I guess, initially for a while, until I kind of hit a breaking point, which we'll talk about later, where I had to go get proper help, and that's when I had to raise the flag in the military, and I then got some very good help, a great psychologist, and it's really helped me work through some things. So.
And I just want to bring in Jess and the kids because I like that's a really great right at that point, so you're at headquarters, 17th Brigade, and then in 2022-23, this is where you actually complete your masters, and so you go back to uni, mate. Like,
yeah,
what was that challenging? Because, like, obviously you're doing military courses and promotion, like getting promoted to new ranks and stuff, but going back to school, mate, that would have been hard.
Yeah, so it was an interesting thing. So when I was at headquarters, I realised I was kind of coming to the end of my pathway. So I'd left SOCOM as a WO, and I wanted to go back as a WO, but post that, I was like, what am I going to do for my career? Because I want to keep serving, want to keep doing good stuff. So I started to investigate project management, because I figured if I could move off into the project space within defence, I could then help improve equipment, systems, all those things that we brought in. So under the guise of that, during COVID, when all those free courses were happening through the TAFE and that, I did an intro to project management and risk management through that, and I did that through that period when I had the time, and that was good. I enjoyed that. And then I was a WO 2 and my officer who was a WO 1, and she actually she did a bit of digging, because I was just going to pay for it myself, and she did a bit of digging. She's like, oh, well, actually there's out there that you can get a master's degree sponsored in project management, but it only ever goes to engineers. She's like, but hey, because she'd actually done time at scheme. She's like, let's ring them up and ask. So we did, and we contacted them, and they're like, look, it actually isn't owned by engineers, but they're the ones who they're the most fitting for it. She goes, look, write your justification. I'll present you to the board, and it's because she wanted a bit of change to show that other corps could do this sort of stuff. So she goes, I'll present you to the board. She goes, don't bank on this, but she goes, I think it's worth pursuing. So anyway, I got presented, because it's a board of officers who select who get there, because there's only for ORs, there's 2 masters sponsored for 1 position each. One's in master's degree in people management, and one's a master's in project management. She presented me to the board, and I got selected. So I got an email and a phone call saying, hey, if you want to do this, we'll sponsor you. And I'm like, oh, I was not expecting that. So, and I had never done uni. So I'd done TAFE diplomas. By this point, Army had actually got medics registered as enrolled nurses. So I got my diploma in enrolled nursing. So I had to go through those rigmaroles, but I hadn't ever done proper university. And all of a sudden now I'm doing a master's degree, which was, for the year, 16 assignments in a 12-month period. And two of them were over 6,000 word assignments. So anyway, I was like, all right, I better hit the ground running. So luckily I'd spoken to the engineer who's currently on there, and he kind of gave me some good grounding about like what the expectations were, like, and he was really helpful. So I obviously jumped onto it and leaned into it, and I just had to hit the ground running. The biggest hurdle, assignments I was really good with, because it's just like I would step back. The best advice I got from that engineer was to work backwards like you would any training program. So you know when things are due. So I literally created a spreadsheet each semester of due dates. Plug those dates in, but then works back timelines of how long I had for each thing. So for an academic essay that's 2,000 plus words, give myself a week and a half. Half a week, 4 days of research, 4 days of writing kind of thing. If it's a big assignment, I give myself 2 weeks, whatever it was. So I worked myself back, and that was brilliant because I was handing things in. A couple of times I handed something in, and someone in a study group would be like, oh, I've got to say, I've already handed that in. They're like, what? I'm like, dude, I'm on assignment blah for this subject. Because coming to the end of each semester, I'd be tight on time. But it worked really well. Like, so I just militarized the fuck out of that. And then the part I did struggle with was academic essays, because I hadn't done academic writing before.
I know what that's like.
Yeah, a few times I passed everything, got pretty good. I got really good grades on assignments, because that's just research and presenting findings and
putting
it's all systematic. But academic writing is all about interpretation, and being military, I'm a little bit like to the point.
Don't worry, I'm the same, mate.
Yeah. So anyway, I would pass them all. There are a few comments where you could have gone a bit deeper on that. I'm like, well, mate, I answered your question. I hit your word count and answered your question.
That's right. So, and that's my mentor, because when I went to uni as well, I didn't finish, but I did do a few semesters, and I know exactly what you're talking about with academic writing, because it was all she said was HD's equal degree, P's equal degree. Doesn't matter if you get a P, it still equals that degree. And academic writing is where you got to reference this, and you got to, forget it.
I didn't know, the referencing wasn't tough. I was just more there like, I just kept getting done for not deep enough. And also, whether you care about the subject matter can be difficult. A couple of the essays I just did not care about, and I passed them and just didn't get.
That's it. That's
it. Is what it is.
Yeah, those subjects. Yeah,
but no, look, overall, it was tough, but I treated it like a job. So I would literally drop my kids off at school. I would hit the gym. I would be fingers on the keys at 9:30. I'd work till 4 every day, and Monday to Friday. And by doing that, I actually only worked about 3 weekends the entire degree, and only a few nights. And that was on the big assignments. Besides that, it was literally a 9 to 5 for me. Yeah, so, and it worked well.
And mate, you got your degree in project management, and then in 2023-24, you post back to the 2nd Commando Regiment. What was your role here this time?
Yeah, so the plan had been post the master's degree, I was meant to go into projects as a WO. They were standing up some new medical projects, and I was posting there. The postings got killed because of the job. They just crushed that project. And then I got approached by Skimmer going, look, we know that was the plan. That was our plan. He goes, but the WOMED job's available that you've put as like your choice throughout the years. Do you want it? And I said, yeah, of course I want it. I'd always wanted to go back, be WOMED, and give the support to the kilos that I received from my sergeant and warrants. So I wanted to do that, and so I took the job. So what was my job? So my job was the WOMED. So there's a lot I can't talk about, but the medical. So we had gone through at the time a shake-up of the job role. Medics used to always belong to medical platoon, but then were allocated to companies. What they'd done in my absence was there had been a bit of turmoil about some things, and they fully pulled medics out of medical platoon and they were put in companies permanently. So coming into that role, while I didn't support that decision, it's not my. I still had to make it work. So my job was to come in, ensure those medics, kilos, were getting the support they needed, the planning support they needed, the career support, and the big one is, because we're by this point registered under APRA, is do their clinical requirements, because we have yearly clinical requirements must be met. So luckily, once again, because of my time in the unit, I knew everyone. I pretty much I knew a lot of the people I engaged with, the seniors, and if I didn't, they knew me by reputation, so I didn't meet resistance. So it was very serendipitous. And that we just made it work, because the intent was they were trialling this scheme for a year, and if it didn't work, they were going to go back to the old system of bringing all the medics back into the platoon, where they were regulated in that platoon, and then they were given to the company. It was a mum and dad relationship is the best way I used to explain it.
Yeah.
Like the med platoon, you're owned by them, but you are holus and bolus in the companies, but the medical platoon managed you as an individual, whereas you just did your job for the company.
Yeah.
Whereas once the company took ownership of them, they realised medics aren't the same as shooters, and it's a little bit more complicated. So anyway, so we just made it work. Obviously, my other big roles there, that was like a man management part. The other big role was domestic and operational planning, which once again, can't talk about that stuff.
Of course.
That's a very big role for the WOMED. And obviously forward projection of like our capability. So grow the capability, ensure what we have is world-class standard. Working with other units it's a very, very time-consuming role and lots of things. And big one is keeping soldiers on track, because the thing about getting the cream of the crop of medics, girls and guys, are brilliant there, but they're all super passionate, which means they're all super motivated to make things better, in air quotes. But everyone has an idea of what is better. So everyone's after the new shiny thing, and great ideas, well driven, but it's keeping them grounded on that, like, yep, that's a great idea, let's move forward with it. That one is not something we can probably look at the moment.
So that's the role that you're in now, and during this time there was an incident attached to when you were back at 2. Without going into too much detail, there is still ongoing court cases and things that are happening. How did that affect you? Because you dealt with this trauma from Afghan. Now this is happening back again, like Mace did, on home soil.
Yeah, so like I said, I can't talk a lot about it, but I was involved with their MRH-90 accident during Talisman Sabre in 23. Yeah, it's really hard to talk about because there's a lot tied up in it, but obviously when we lost those guys, I was involved, and that was kind of I think that was the part where I started to really come undone. I am just after the incident happened, I was involved in the responses and stuff like that, and then I was operating out of Sydney still. I left. And I'm man enough to admit it. I've said to other people before that I got in my car and I just lost it. I just cried. I drove home. It was actually a sad day. It was my daughter's netball game. My wife had known something happened because of the news. I got to the netball game and I got there and she's like, "Oh, you don't have to be here. Go home. It's okay." And I said, "No, I want to be here. I want to see my daughter play netball. I want to be a part of something normal." And it was, so we finished out that exercise and I just kept pushing forward, but we finished out the exercise. I then took a week off, and I've also talked to people about this before. I had to walk out my front door, put my uniform back on, walk out the front door to go back to work, and I was in tears. But I pushed it all down, got to work because I was a WOMED. I was in a no-fail job. So the WOMED is not someone who can just not be there. There's too much going on, and there's a lot, there's things that need to be actioned all the time. So I pushed through, and this was in July, end of July. I started to reach out to Open Arms again to get help behind the scenes because I was really struggling. At work, people couldn't tell. People knew it was hard for me because it was another helicopter crash I was involved in that Australians died in, Welland Commandos. But they didn't see that, like, every day I was coming home nearly like just a wreck. But I just knew I had to hold on to the end of the year because my plan had been I'd been offered promotion to Woe 1, so I'd only done 1 year at the command, and when I'd been offered promotion, I didn't want to leave the command because I only just got back and I was trying to do the best I could for everyone and make things better. But I also knew there's only 7 Woe 1 jobs for medics. So I knew if I turned it down, it would be a missing opportunity to maybe help at a bigger scale. So I accepted it. So my plan had been to just make it to Christmas leave and then just like go into a different job that I could step back from that's not operationally focused. Because that's what happened in the school. I left an operational unit, got to a school where I could like step back a bit and just reset. So I was like, yep, I just got to get to my new job at Headquarters 4 Commands and then I can just reset, like get some help and reset. So I rode the year out, made sure I left the place in a much better condition than I got it, and that's no slight against the person before me. He did a great job too. I just really wanted to push us forward because he'd been held back by some individuals and I wasn't being held back by people, so I really wanted to get the unit in a really good place so when I handed it over to the person after me, my kilos, the ones I wanted to support, were set up the best they could be set up. And I think I made that happen. Anyway, I went on Christmas leave. I was still on call, so I was still just fighting through some stuff. And then when on call ended, I just fucking fell apart. I was like, I just fucking can't. I can't put my uniform back on. I can't do it. So I put the flag up and went and got some help through the actual Army medical system. The psych, I'd been dealing with the psych, I won't say her name, but she was great. And then she referred me on to a psych who deals with a lot of Special Forces guys. He's got experience in the unit himself, and he helps a lot of guys and girls, still is. So I got referred to him, and we started just talking about things. And in the medical system, you essentially have a 4-month gap. So once you raise that flag, you got 4 months to make the decision if you're coming back or not. That got put on me a bit earlier than 4 months, and I wasn't expecting it, and I just didn't know what to do. But essentially I was given the choice, you have to come back, you have to put a uniform on, it can only be a few days a week, whatever, but we need you to come back, if you're going to come back. And I just couldn't put the uniform back on, so I said, all right, if I have to make the call now, I'm going to go out. And then they came back to me and actually said, oh, look, actually, we could offer you another year of rehab through another way through the system, and you can stay for another year and then make your decision. And I'm like, honestly, you've put me in a position where I have to make the call, and I've made the call. And look, it breaks my heart to have left under the medical system. I never thought I would. Like, I always thought I was just going to do my time as a Woe 1 and then either become an officer or get out and just do some other things like kicking around still. But I just for myself and for my family, I needed to make the right call, and I did. So I pulled the pin, and then I obviously then started the med discharge path. So that was I started that in January 24 and I was out January 25.
And I just want to touch on here as well, because you were Woe 1 at HQ 4 Command, is that?
So that was my posting. So
right.
I left 2 Command as a Woe 2, posting on promotion to Woe 1. So I wore the rank for a few months.
Yeah.
Obviously technically I wore it for a year while I was discharging, but yeah, anyway. But yeah, so I never actually took on the role. They were really good about it though. Like when I reached out and told them, they're like, yep, no, we'll make this work. They didn't make me feel like a piece of shit or anything. Yep. I had a really good major I was sitting alongside in the job, and she took over my case management. She was great. Like not once ever feel like I was a piece of shit leaving this way.
Mate, I've done 165 of these now. Every veteran and first responder struggles with transition. After 23 years of service, you go through that process. How has it been? Because we're in 2026. How has that transition been for you to go from this is all you've known to now being a civilian and being a dad, a husband, a friend. How is that going for you?
Yeah. It's one of those funny things. I never consider myself a full green guy. Like, I love the uniform, proud to wear it, proud of what I did, but I never thought myself as one of those people. But it was difficult, mainly because of the loss of purpose for me. So I'd always been driven forward by, all right, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this job, then I want this job. In this job, I can get this done. I can make things better here. I've always been driven forward by trying to get to a good job where I can make things better for myself and other medics. I've always been driven by that. So then now I'm out, I'm on med leave, seeing psych twice a week, doing other medical appointments because I've got other long-term injuries, just trying to get myself into a good shape, I guess. But besides that, having no goal. So I described it to someone once as I felt I was adrift in the river with nothing to hold on to. And it's just taken me time to come to terms with right now I need to focus on my rehab, get myself mentally right for my family, get myself in a better position that I can maybe look to do other things going forward, because I've had the unfortunate pleasure of a number of my friends have gone out really badly. I was really struggling when I left, but I was able to pull the pin before it got too bad. But I've had a couple of really close friends who've gone out real hard, real hard, and suicide attempts, just thinking about how their family would be better without them. I have been lucky I didn't get to those levels. So I understand that I want to get myself to a place where I can just feel like I'm me again.
And I just want to interject here for a sec. Do you feel that's because you put your hand up to get the help and realise that you didn't get to that point where it's that slippery slope?
Yeah, I think so. I once talked to a psych friend of mine about suicide and how I didn't understand it, and I didn't judge people. I just didn't understand how people could get to that point. And she said you can't. She put it in a really dumbed down, clear way for me. She said you can't, because people get so far down a pathway they can't see any other option.
Yeah.
She goes, so for you, as long as you realise while you're on that path or before you get to that point on the path, if you can cut it off at the pass, essentially, you can find other options for yourself. So one of my best mates, awesome dude, been best mates since Kapuka, he just worked himself to the bone. Didn't see battlefield traumas or anything like I did, but just ground himself in the military, always military first, everything else second. Ran himself in the ground one day, had a panic attack driving through the front gate. And this is probably about a year before I left. Had a panic attack and just could never go back on base. And had destroyed himself. And he was a big red flag to me, because I already knew I had some mental health problems. But I've been hiding him, and he'd been self-medicating, all the classics. And I just realised I use him as a telltale sign. I'm heading towards this pathway that if I don't get help, I'm going to start abusing medication or alcohol or whatever it may be, and I'm going to fall apart. And the big one I've mentioned a couple times, I didn't want that for my wife or my kids. Yeah. I didn't want them to see that or live through that. So when I realised I was starting to spiral, I pulled the pin, and I'm glad I did, because I'm 2 years into treatment now, and I'm at the point where I'm ready to move forward with other things.
And I think I've spoken to a lot of veterans and first responders who have said it takes about 2 years for them to process that, the Army's not going to call me back. I'm not, the go bag's not ready to go I'm now out, and this is life now away from defence. And so you're now 2 years post, and you're now starting to look at using your project management degree and all that sort of stuff. What are your plans?
Yeah, irony, no, not at all. So that had always been the plan, is move in that space in defence, and then if I decide to leave, I could move in that space in the civilian way. But it's not what I'm passionate about. I've always been passionate about veterans, like as in looking after soldiers. Like I spent 23 years as someone looking out for soldiers and looking after soldiers. So for me, while I've been offered some opportunities with project management, good paying opportunities, it's not like I want to move into a space where I can support veterans. So my plan is I was meant to start my graduate diploma in psychology in February this year, but I just wasn't ready for it. I thought I was ready, but then like I realised late last year I'm just not there. I'm going to end up in the same path I was at SOCOM, where working my guts out for this thing, and then my family's not getting the best version of me. So I postponed that to mid-year, and I've got to make a decision about if I want to go that pathway. I'm also considering either that, or I might just move into the counselling pathway and do counselling rather than psychology. But my goal is, and I've got to make some decisions about that, but my goal is to support veterans, like get into the space where I've been very lucky through my career. I've always had very good bosses above me who've looked out for me, and even moving out, I've had very good health professionals looking out for me. I want to be able to do that for other veterans. So that's where I'd be interested in moving, is into that space to support veterans.
And I think, mate, you'd be an absolute asset in that space. Like from what you've experienced, the knowledge through your own journey, that now you can then pass on to help others who are at that critical point where, it's that, what you said, on the battlefield, it's giving them that. And I know, because I've, gone on and done my mental health first aid training, and it's, as we were told by the instructor, is you're not there to clinically treat the people, you're there to basically triage them to realise that they actually need some help. Like they need to go and speak to a psychologist, like go down that path, because you're not trained in that field, but you're there just to be that ear and start. And I think, mate, you'd be absolutely brilliant in that space. Yeah,
I am definitely interested in the psychology pathway. I've just got to figure out if that's right for me at the moment, and maybe something, like I said, I may just go down the counsellor pathway for a period of time, and then move into that. It's just my priority is myself and my family at the moment, and then work that stuff out. But I do want to start moving ahead. I'm ready to do that. I've been ready for a little bit, but my psychologist himself has said, mate, just take a breath, take a step back. You're not in the command anymore. It doesn't always need to be driving everything forward. Like sometimes it's okay, just look out for yourself.
Take that, yeah. And mate, great. That's why
yeah, but he loves to have a joke about it. I just can't let things lie. Like, I can't stop moving. So
of course,
it just comes with the nature of the job.
Yeah, and that's right. And mate, I've got a few final questions before we wrap it up, and it's just, what a story, mate. Like, we were talking off air, and it's just, and mate, I want to thank you for your time that you've given me as well, away from your family. And it's, I know how important time is with your family, so I really do appreciate it. And I will thank Jess when we go inside. So, mate, looking back now, you served with some amazing guys in 2 Commando, and there was 12 commandos killed in action, and Mace preparing for deployment. How do you reflect? Like, obviously, you didn't know them all, but how do you reflect on the guys that were lost?
So yeah, that's a tough question, because I remember them in different ways. So, like we spoke about, for a long time I used them as a driving force. That I came home and they didn't, so I need to be better. I need to push harder. I need to keep moving forward, which I've discovered through some mental health treatment of my own, that's probably not the best way to do things, to just keep driving yourself forward till you grind yourself up. But I did find, for a long time, I did, because I just, like I said, if they're not here and I'm here, I can be better. But then, now, retrospectively, I try to think about, like, the positive influences they had on me. So, like I spoke about with Tim, early in my career, positive influence, and then even them randomly running in, Sergeant when I'm a private, now I run into him and I'm a corporal and he's a private, and, like, just talking shit in the breezeway. And then for a period of time, he was actually he was one of my trainers, like, I was integrating. And then even the morning of the crash, we actually had a joke in the hallway, like just remembering the like conversations and the joking with Tim. For Scotty used to challenge me a lot. So he would challenge my medical decisions, not because he thought I was wrong, but he wanted to challenge me and make sure I was doing the best for him and the guy. So I'd make a decision, he'd challenge me and we'd talk it out so he understood why I had made a decision. And I never had a problem with it because by that time he'd done a couple of trips and like I always respected other input on my decisions. So he was just a driving force himself. Like he's like me, a bit of a bigger fella, but always worked his guts out to be where he was.
And, mate, I'll interject here because Slats told me this, that he was one that helped with him and also, what's his name? Oh, I've forgotten his name, which is terrible. Ian Turner helped the night that Damien Tomlinson lost his legs and played a major part in Damo being here. I didn't know that. And as you say, Scotty challenging you from what he did and, 12 months later, he tragically would lose his life.
Yeah, and that's it. And so I always remember Scotty for that, like just being that, like he was a professional and he was driven and and a respectable guy for all those reasons. And then there was like obviously Ben, who was just like this really humble guy. We did some because he was a CFA, so CFAs do advanced training with the medics prior to deployment, to work in a team, so we can build our team cohesion. Me and him did some training that I can't talk about, but he just. So I'd done a bit of training with him, and just this really nice, humble guy. Like it was super respected, and just. Yeah, so, and then obviously there was Mason, who was just a genuinely great guy who really looked out for me, really helped me, and in some ways, obviously, rest in peace, tempered me for the trip, because losing Mason before the trip really had to harden me before I got overseas. And obviously I would, if I could take that back, I would. But it just, yeah, so I think I had to make that, and I knew a lot of the other guys who passed away, but not as close as those four guys, because they were all in my company with me. So using remembering the positives about them rather than thinking about them as a burden. I carry an emotional burden, thinking about all the good stuff who they were and what they'd done. I think is how I like to remember those guys.
And mate, you mentioned Gary. Look at what he's gone on to do. Yeah. He's a beacon of hope of what was and a lot of the other guys that have survived as well that have gone on to do things post that crash.
Yeah, he is a beacon of hope for recovery. He went from when he got back to Australia, still hadn't woken up, to he may never wake up, to when he wakes up, may never walk, may never talk, to now he's a fitness instructor.
Now he rides a motorbike.
Yeah, rides motorbikes, writing a book, fitness instructor, all these things. But to be told he may never wake up, to he may never talk, he may never walk, and look, it's not from any lack of drive, that's for sure. He's pushed himself and probably pushed himself too hard at times, and had to find his own boundaries. But Gary's a great representation.
Great man, great man, and someone that I talk to a lot as well, and he's a good friend. I class him as a friend as well. Yeah. Someone that I look to as well as that beacon of when I'm going through a bad day, I look at what he goes through and what Damien and also Curtis McGrath and all these guys go through, Paul de Gelder, Paul Warren. I look and go, well, my day isn't they've actually lost limbs.
Yeah.
What am I going through to what they've gone through? And that's sometimes you need that bit of reality check to
grounding.
Exactly. And mate, in your opinion, with what happened in Afghanistan and the way that it turned out, looking back, and this is from just not medical, just looking, should we have gone and thought of what happened in how Afghanistan turned out? And
yeah, look, another tough question, but look, the way I view Afghanistan, so I went during the Hearts and Minds campaign. So the way I view Afghanistan, and I'm a part of a documentary in the War Memorial too, and I was asked a similar question, is I know that while I was there, I did the very best I could for the Afghani people to live the best possible life they could. So we did a lot of med caps. So I assisted a lot of people medically. I helped young and the old. And I left Afghanistan knowing that while we may not have fixed the place, I did the best I could for the Afghani people while I was there. I mean, look, it was heartbreaking when we pulled out and it all just reverted nearly straight away. And look, I guess you could be cynical about that, but at least for a period of time, we gave people hope to maybe live a better life. Arguably for the larger global picture and the politics involved in all of that, look, you could argue it both ways, and I don't think you could be wrong. Honestly, for me, I know the reason I can sleep at night is I know I did no wrong, and I made sure I did the best for those people I could.
No, I think there's people that a generation saw life outside of Taliban rule and could go to school, could go to university, get degrees, leave the country, move to Australia or other parts of the world, and actually live a life that was, you were there, mate. I've only sat across from you guys. I wasn't there, but from Taliban rule, and now what it is, So I think that's a really good way of looking at your. It wasn't a waste. It was, you went in and you did the best you could at the time with hands really tied behind your back, one arm tied behind your back in, rules of engagement. When an enemy doesn't have rules of engagement, they're not governed by rules of engagement. So I think, really good way to look at it. And mate, if you could go back now, knowing what you know and all that you've been through, the traumas and everything that you've experienced, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
So, in regards to going back in time and giving myself advice, I wouldn't change anything. Even though the career I've had has been hard at times, it's also been amazing at times. And the goods and the bads have shaped who I am. So the boy that entered is not the person I am now. I was shy, quiet kid, unsure of myself in a lot of ways, and the military changed me for the better for all of those things. I guess the only advice I would give myself would be maybe how to train better. So I started training a bit better early in my career, and it could have maybe made things a bit easier for myself along the way. But no, look, there's not a lot of advice I would give you. I think the goods and the bads are who you are, and if you're happy, and I am happy with who I am, the man I become, and the father I try to be. So all of those things, the tragedies and the happiness, all led to that. So there's nothing I would change. Yeah,
and what advice would you give families of military that have got a spouse or a partner or a loved one that is in the military? What advice would you give to the families of, understand that it's going to be a career where you go on the journey with them, or what advice can you give to families?
That's a good one. There's not a lot it's hard to give advice about that, because in the sense of, for example, to a spouse, I think you need to find the right spouse for you, because I and many others have seen when the wrong people are paired together, how it can impact careers and both sets of happiness. I've had relationships that just haven't worked out because of military, not because they were a bad person or I'm a bad person, just hasn't worked out because they, didn't accept the military or understand the military. Like I said, my wife, Jess, she's never done military service, but she understands it was important to me, and she also understood I would always put the family first if I could. So there were times where I literally missed birthday parties. I haven't missed births or anything like that, thank God. I'd probably never lived that one down, but I missed birthdays, I missed important dates. And she gets it, because it was who I was before we met, and also she appreciates that, but also she appreciates it was like what I wanted to do. I mean, the advice I would be is you've got to be, it's open communication. So I think that's why we worked, is because I was always open with her. Obviously what I couldn't tell her some things, but because I was bound by secrecy laws.
Of course.
But I was always open about what I could be. I was always made sure she understood me and how the military worked. And I think it's corny as it sounds, it's all about the communication. Because if you don't talk to each other, like, you just get
breaks
shit.
down. Yep.
You get shit at each other because you go on bush again, and then you're just shitty because she's shitty. It's never going to work. You got to be like, yeah, I get it. It sucks, sweetheart, but I've got to do this. But look, I'll try when I can. I'll get the leave. We'll do some stuff.
It's part of the job, and
but you got to be open about that going into in a new relationship, especially. Like, no, they need to know, because if you just try and blind someone, like, I'll be fine. You spend 6 months, like, even as a senior soldier, I would spend on average between 4 to 6 months of a year away doing courses or deployments or exercises. So.
I think that's a really, if any families or any spouse take when they listen to this, and might give them just a little bit more understanding of what the job entails, because you give, like, all of you and first responders, as I know as well, we give it our all. Like, you give it your all to serve, and being of service. That's what it is. Unfortunately, sometimes can lead to, as you say, like, how many marriages are broken down, mate? How many of your mates have you seen where families are now split?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So, all that you've gone through, mate, and you said it earlier with the 18-year-old self, but was joining the military still the best decision? Apart from marrying Jess and having the kids?
100%.
Yeah.
It's always what I always wanted. Yeah, I mean, I knew what I was doing. Obviously, I didn't know how bad it was going to get sometimes. But I don't regret joining. I tell people now when they talk about joining, as long as you understand what you're doing, understand what you're signing up for, understanding it is a commitment. It's not like other jobs. I tried to explain to partners in the past, like, they own you. Like, you need to accept that. They own you. They can say, hey, you're going field next week. And I once had a partner say, oh, just don't go. It's like, well, it's either field or jail. They're my options. And I prefer field. So, and I literally have had that conversation with a couple of ex-partners. But it's, no, I don't regret it. Like, I loved it. Me and my best mate talk about it because he came from country New South Wales. I came from Melbourne. But we both came from, like, families who worked hard to provide but didn't have a lot. The military's given me a lot. Like, it's gave me a stable career, gave me a purpose, gave me a good paycheck, and gave me something I could be proud of. So I don't regret it at all. Like, do I wish I didn't go out the way I did? 100%. Do I wish I didn't have a lot of good men die in my care? 100%. But also, that's also part of the job. You can't have the good and the bad.
You said it yourself, mate. You got everything you wanted, and then there was a flip side. And that flip side was you were serving alongside Special Forces, and in that role, in that job, in that capability, unfortunately, it's dangerous. And, and 2 Commando suffered the most losses in the Afghanistan campaign.
Yeah, there was a point where I had stopped counting funerals, honestly. By the time I was 28, I'd gone to way too many funerals. So.
And then post, mate, you've lost mates through, that have gone that. So, yeah, service has a toll, mate. It really does. And, yeah, you mention, as you say, there's you give advice to know that people are going to join. It's going to take a lot. You've got to have people that are patient. But what advice would you give to any young person who is thinking of going down that medical path of what you did and sort of forging a career similar to what you did?
Oh, I'd recommend it. Once again, so you see it when I used to teach at the school. I was always be invited by another part of the school who taught doctors and nurses when they joined the army because they joined qualified. And they'd always ask me to come talk to them about the Afghanistan stuff to give them context, because the difference between treating someone in civilian world and military is you're going to know them. So in the civilian world, it's very unlikely you're going to know someone who you're treating, and if you do, you'll treat them till you can hand over as soon as possible because of conflicts of interest and the trauma it brings. The military is the complete opposite. The likelihood is you will know this person. You may only know them a little bit, or you may be friends with them. And you need... So having that context is key. Like, it requires the knowledge that you may know. However, it's extremely rewarding. Like, I love being a medic. Helping people, like, not even just the trauma stuff. Like, the trauma stuff is what all people think about, but... You help people with other medical staff. Just being the person they go to. In the world of support staff, medical are the most fondly looked on normally, because we're not there trying to, like, issue them this or take this off them, or they can only have 2 pieces of bacon. We're there trying to keep them going, keep them doing their job. So I was always well looked after, well respected, and I also just really enjoyed the gig. So I would definitely recommend it. Need to understand, though, that it can come with the flip side of maybe your friend in your hands.
Of course. Nah, great advice, mate. And I've got two final questions, and then I'll wrap it up, mate. And it's just been absolutely... What have we spoken for? 3.5 hours. Like, mate, I could have spoken to you for another 6. It was just... And, mate, as I said, I thank you for the time that you've given me. And you mentioned that you sort of want to go down that counselling sort of path, but what are your plans moving forward now with your family? What do you want to do with them moving into the future?
Well, a big one is just being around here, mate. Like we spoke about earlier, I'm literally about to put a second story on top of my house, so I'm not looking forward to that renovation, but just to give them a bit more room to grow, because the cost of everything these days is they're probably going to be with us for a bit longer. Yeah. But the big one is just getting myself right for them, mate. Like, it's a constant driving force for me. Is if it was just me or just me and Jess, I would probably be fine with how I am now. But even now, days are hard sometimes. Things are hard. And it's hard for every parent. I'm very acutely aware of that. It's just really hard sometimes to just be the best dad I can be. So my goal is to get myself sorted out so they can have the best dad they can, and we can spend the time together. I get my kids' school 600 metres from my house. I get to walk them to school every day at the moment, pick them up. I love all of that stuff. May not be the most emotionally available dad sometimes, but I am trying to get there for them. And that's my goal for them moving forward. Of course.
No, mate, I think, yeah, as you said, mate, no one's perfect. No one is. And I hate the word perfect, because it shouldn't really be, because you can't aim for perfection. It doesn't exist. We're humans, and there's a human element, and sometimes we fall short, and that's life. But I think if you're just trying to be the best version of yourself every day, that's all you can ask, mate. And your kids remember it. This is the time where they remember it, or going forward into their adult life. And I'm at the other end now, where my dad's got dementia, and, mate, I'm seeing him slip away, and it is the hardest thing to watch your hero slip away. And, so every moment that you have with your kids, or vice versa with your parents, that's precious.
And it's a big one. Like I said, it's a big driving factor for me, mate, especially because my kids are young. I've got some mates who started getting help, but it's real hard for them now with their kids, because their kids are older, and Dad was just hard. Like, Dad was a hard ass, or Dad was always sad, or Dad was always mad when they were young. And I still sometimes like that, but they're young enough that I can try to make sure I fix that stuff before it's too late.
Of course. And, mate, this is why we've recorded the podcast, mate, for them. This is to capture it. And you've seen it all too often with the TBIs now that are happening around the unit, and both wider army and also the cats over in the west. Mate, it's capturing these stories for your kids that, if something, touch wood, it doesn't happen in the future, mate, with, that's why we capture these stories, so that it's captured for history forever.
Yeah, and that's a big one for me, is I want them to hear these tales from myself.
Exactly. And, mate, how do people get in contact with you if they want to reach out to you for either medical stuff or transition or looking to join the army? How do they get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn and socials. I mean, my LinkedIn's a bit bare bones and hasn't been touched up for a while. It's actually on my to-do list to fix that one up. Now I'm a dirty civvy who's got to look at future career opportunities. So, but I'm on LinkedIn and my Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah, and we'll put all the links to the show notes, mate. And Damo, what a story, mate! Just wow, mate. absolutely epic story, and I want to finish with this, mate. You've served your country with honour and brought pride to your family. Your story is one of true grit, determination, and never giving up. You have persevered when others wouldn't. I want to thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for what you're doing for veterans and also first responders and people who are struggling with mental health. And I appreciate you, mate, coming on True Blue, and I know how hard it is to be vulnerable and share your story. So thanks, mate.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it, mate.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those that pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice, and determination. See you next time.